Chapter 1029. The practice of the Mongolians completely aroused public anger. The problem was that, as the castles gradually took shape, a difficult problem was placed in front of the Lin and garrison. Should we stop the enemy from building the castles? If the castles were really built, the Mongolian army could use it as a springboard, and Lin and city would suffer. For this matter, the Grand Council held an emergency meeting. Lu Xiufu, who presided over the daily affairs of the Grand Council, spoke first. Everyone, please speak your views. In principle, the minority obeys the majority. As the only civil officer of the Grand Council, I will not express my opinion. This old cunning man gave up as soon as he came up and threw the problem to others. Of course not. They are our compatriots. When Tianxiang's attitude was clear, Zhang Shiji saw this, and a trace of dissatisfaction flashed in his eyes. He, as the main general, had not yet expressed his position, but when Tianxiang, as the deputy general, had expressed his position first. Zhang Shiji was a little hesitant at first, but this time he was completely determined and said with emotion, I think we should kill. This is not a question of whether we should or not. If we don't solve the castles, Lin and city can't be kept at all. The lives of the captured people are lives, but the lives of millions of people in Lin and city are not lives. What Zhang Shiji said was not unreasonable. In troubled times, there were not many conditions to talk about benevolence and righteousness. Many times, one must make a choice. This was very cruel, but it was the reality. When Tianxiang was dissatisfied, Zhang Shiji did not care. He had his own reasons. I also think we should kill. Xiongba also expressed his position. As an ambitious man, being soft-hearted was not the same as being a tyrant. Moreover, this was a military map. The goal of the players was to win. The death of NPCs had nothing to do with him. The supporters had the upper hand, 2-1. Lianpa saw this and said, I give up. Emotionally speaking, Lianpa did not want to increase the killing. The shadow of Bai Qi killing captives in the Battle of Chongping was still hovering in Lianpa's heart. But as a general, Lianpa thought that they should be killed. Under the contradiction, he could only give up. Xiongba saw this and also glanced at Lianpa. Logically speaking, as a general of the Yan-Huang alliance, Lianpa should have followed the rhythm of his leader. Fortunately, Lianpa's abstention did not affect the overall situation. In Xiongba's view, Ouyang Shuo was an ambitious man like him. Naturally, he would not be soft-hearted. Guizi would definitely follow Ouyang Shuo. In this way, the supporters still had the upper hand. Everyone's gaze was focused on Ouyang Shuo. Ouyang Shuo, on the other hand, was calm. He slowly put down the teacup in his hand and lightly said, I object. Everyone was shocked. Reason? Xiongba asked. As far as Xiongba was concerned, Ouyang Shuo was absolutely not a person that acted on his emotions. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to achieve his current accomplishments. Come down first. Ouyang Shuo naturally had his reasons for doing so, but it wasn't appropriate for him to say it clearly at the meeting. Lu Xiufu deeply looked at Ouyang Shuo and concluded, 3 votes against, 2 votes for, and 2 votes abstained. Since that's the case, let's think of another way. The decision of the Grand Council was naturally the final decision. After the meeting, Xiongba caught up with Ouyang Shuo. Before Xiongba could inquire further, Ouyang Shuo spoke first. I think it's not only you, but the others also have the same doubts. Let's gather everyone together and discuss it together. Xiongba was puzzled. Are you that confident that you can convince Di, Chun, and the others? Ouyang Shuo smiled without saying a word. Xiongba shook his head and left. Lin Inn, North City Tower. Ouyang Shuo, Xiongba, and the other lords gathered together. Xiongba looked at Ouyang Shuo with inquiring eyes. Before coming, there was a short meeting within the Yan-Huang alliance, and the atmosphere wasn't good. Especially Lord Chunshin, who spoke without mercy. What is the old fox trying to do? Is he trying to buy people's hearts? Or is he using our victory to sell his benevolence? Great Xia has already destroyed 4 countries in the main plain and killed countless people. Now he's pretending that he doesn't have the heart to do so. He's really trying to be a pawn, but still trying to put up a memorial arch. Di Chun and the others had ugly expressions on their faces. On the city tower, Ouyang Shua didn't seem to feel the piercing gazes coming from behind him. He looked at the continuous line of yurts outside the city and said unhurriedly, "What do you think Gaia's goal is in arranging such a battle? What else can it be? It's a battle. Isn't it just a battle to gain merit points?" Ouyang Shua shook his head. "I don't think so. Perhaps the previous battle had this goal, but it's definitely not this battle. To put it bluntly, the merit points that Great Xia gained in the Annan region battle is equivalent to 10 battles. A battle isn't worth Great Xia investing 100,000 soldiers." Di Chun and the others were speechless. They knew that Great Xia was powerful, but there was no need to show off. "What kind of truth are you spouting? It's very hurtful." "Then tell me, what is Gaia's goal?" Xiongba asked. "No matter what you think, in my opinion, this battle is actually to make up for a regret. My Han family's empire must not fall into the hands of other races. Although it's a little self-deceiving, it's also a rare experience." "Yeah, you're quite emotional," Lord Chunshin ridiculed. The others didn't say anything. They all looked out of the city and watched the hellish scene. The Mongolians had never stopped refining corpse oil. From morning till night, screams could be heard incessantly. The refined corpse oil was then smeared on the city walls by the Han commoners. Like other city walls, Lin and city walls used wood as the frame and glutinous rice juice as the binder. After being smeared with corpse oil, it would easily burn. Basically, after a few days, the city walls and city gates would be burnt down or destroyed. This was the secret of the Mongolian army's siege. Although they were cavalry, they could attack cities in the Central Plains without suffering any damage to their main forces. The secret was this kind of heinous method of attacking the city. "Ouyang, I support you." Looking at the tragic scene outside the city, Feng Qiuwang's face was still pale. Finally, she stopped vomiting. Perhaps she had vomited everything she could. All that was left was hatred and grief. "If we kill the commoners outside the city, how are we different from those beasts?" Feng Qiuwang said righteously. Xiongba and the rest were silent. Warwolf, who was a soldier, was the first to say, "Well said. Maybe this battle is a test from Gaia. Let's see if we can win by ignoring our conscience, or if we can win without harming our fellow countrymen." "Easy for you to say," Lord Chunshin muttered. He was the most unwilling to give up. Lord Chunshin, who was a merchant, only had victory in his eyes. He had no benevolence or righteousness. Ouyang Shua suddenly turned around and looked at Di Chun. He asked lightly, "What do you think?" He wanted to know what choice Di Chun would make. Di Chun felt his heart palpitate for no reason. He was stunned for a moment before saying with difficulty, "Since you've said so much, then we'll do as you say. But remember, you owe us a favor." "All right." Ouyang Shua gave Di Chun a deep look before turning around again. Many years later, Di Chun suddenly recalled this seemingly ordinary conversation. He could not help but break out in a cold sweat. It was only then that Di Chun came to his senses. This conversation had directly sealed his fate. Lin and City had reached an agreement to never compromise with the Mongolian army. The problem in front of them was how to break the Mongolian army's siege strategy. The first thing they had to do was to clear the boilers outside the city. Conscripting commoners to build forts was acceptable, but using commoners to refine corpse oil was unacceptable. It had to be stopped. The Grand Council solution was simple: demolish. First, they would use the catapults or the 3-bow 8-bull bed crossbows to destroy the boilers. If it did not work, they would send elite cavalry out of the city to destroy it. This cavalry was like a suicide squad. If they could return, they would. If not, they would die in battle outside the city. Before the forts were built, Ouyang Shua and the rest did not believe that the Mongolian army would launch an all-out attack. If they really attacked the city, the army lying in ambush near the city gates would show the Mongolian army how powerful they were. Everything went smoothly. In just one day, hundreds of boilers outside the city were cleared. For this, the defending troops on all sides paid the price of 3,000 elite cavalry. The Mongolian cavalry was not easy to deal with. They were all skilled with bows and horses. Since the Southern Song cavalry dared to destroy the city, They would make sure that these small troops would not be able to return. For the whole day, there were fights between small groups of cavalry outside the city. Although it was a small-scale fight, the strength of each army was obvious. The weakest was naturally the Southern Song Imperial Army. They were completely at a disadvantage in the fight against the Mongolian cavalry. They might even lose in a small fight. The strongest was naturally the elite cavalry of Great Xia. When faced with the Mongolian cavalry, who were known for their ferocity, the elite cavalry of Great Xia was not at a disadvantage and even won. The north was also the only side where the cavalry successfully retreated into the city. The elite cavalry of Great Xia only paid the price of 300 casualties to clear all the boilers in the north. They even killed more than 200 Mongolian cavalry. It was a great victory. Seeing the elite cavalry of Great Xia retreat, the Mongolian cavalry did not dare to pursue. This was definitely the first time that the Mongolian army had seen such a scene. Ouyang Shao and Lu Xiufu spread the news in the city and further confirmed the theory of heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals. Think about it. If they were not heavenly soldiers and heavenly generals, how could they defeat the invincible Mongolian cavalry? As such, the people gradually calmed down. In the evening, in the Mongolian barracks in the north, the Mongolian general Bo Ma stopped on a high mountain and looked at the defending army in the north with a grave expression. I did not expect the mutant army to be so powerful. Where did they come from? No one could answer Bo Yin. Zhang Hongfan rode behind Bo Yin with a complicated look in his eyes. He thought to himself, if the Southern Song army was so powerful, how could they have fallen to such a state? Night fell and a cold wind blew. Bo Yin unconsciously pulled the mink coat draped over his body. He took one last look at Lin and city, which was already submerged in the night, and said coldly, "Let's go back." Pass the order to the front line. From tomorrow onwards, speed up the construction of the fort. We will officially attack the city in a few days. Bo Yin faintly felt that this attack would not be as easy as he had imagined. As such, he could not give the enemy too much time to breathe. He had to attack the city as soon as possible. The emperor, who was at the rear, was already getting impatient. If he did not take action now, he was afraid that he would make a mistake. Yes, Zhang Hongfan nodded in response. There was nothing unusual in his voice. Chapter 10:30. On the 10th day of the battle, the siege finally began. Under the supervision of the Mongolian army, 600 earthen castles that were taller than the city walls were built. The starving captives were freed on the spot. Whether they could survive depended on their luck. Some people tried to knock on the gates of Linen, but they were rejected. The Mongolian archers had taken up residence in the earthen castles, and thousands of cannons had been pushed to the front lines. Opening the gates now was tantamount to inviting a wolf into the house. These people could just leave the battlefield and return to their homes. There was no need for them to enter Linen. Linen's food reserves were already stretched thin. It might not be a good thing for these captives to enter the city. At around 9 in the morning, the flames of war started. Although the boilers were destroyed, the Mongolian siege strategy was still the same. The archers in the earthen castles were in charge of suppressing the long-range attackers, while the cannons bombarded the city walls. The defenders returned the favor. The archers, catapults, and ballistae went into battle together and fought against the enemy. The battle on the first day was limited to long-range attackers. It was a tough battle, but the battlefield was cruel. The arrows shot by the archers from both sides formed a crisscrossing arrow net, taking away thousands of lives at every moment. The roar of the catapults had not stopped since the battle began. Be it the Mongolian camp outside the city, the top of the city, or even the vicinity of the city walls, there was smoke and fire everywhere. Although the catapults were catapults, they could also shoot gravel doused in corpse oil. With one shot, the flames of war rose everywhere. The defenders at the top of the city walls fought under the rain of arrows. The temporary laborers at the bottom of the city were not having an easy time either. There were injured people being carried down from the top of the city walls and sent to the nearest medical station. All the doctors in Lin, and regardless of which department they were in, were sent to the medical stations by the imperial court to treat the injured. Every time they saved a person, their combat power would increase. Other than that, the military workshops in the city also worked day and night to produce bundles of arrows. A siege battle like this would consume an astonishing amount of arrows. The whole city was united. The Mongolian army returned without any success on the first day. Not only did they lose more than 10,000 people, but more than 50 earthen castles were destroyed and turned into ruins. The defenders also lost more than 10,000 men. The reason for such a high casualty rate was because they took down the earthen castles. With the earthen castles as cover, the Mongolian archers were not at a disadvantage. In addition, they were generally skilled in archery, so it was only natural that they were not at a disadvantage. On the contrary, there were very few pure archers in the Inhuman army. Most of them were cavaliers who joined the battle spontaneously, and it was clear that they were no match for the Mongolian archers. They were suppressed by the enemy. In this battle, the two sides were evenly matched. In the next 2 days, the situation of the war did not change at all. The Mongolian army, which had 1 million soldiers, was like a perpetual motion machine. They were constantly replenished with fresh blood and launched continuous attacks on Lenin. In the meantime, the Mongolians used another dirty move. They threw the corpses of the soldiers, whether they were enemies or allies, into the moat. For a time, the surface of the river was densely packed with corpses, making one's hair stand on end. What was worse was that the canal in the city of Lin and was connected to the moat. The corpses soaked in the river rotted and smelled, which polluted the water source and then polluted the canal in the city. Water became a problem for the people. The only source of water was underground water. Liu Xiaofu had no choice but to urgently organize officials from the Ministry of Works to dig wells in the city to ensure the supply of water to the people. Fortunately, the duration of this siege was only 1 month. If it was a long-term war, even the underground water would be polluted and the city's water source would be completely cut off. This was a vicious plan. The Mongolian army bombarded the city for 3 days. Except for the northern city wall, the other 3 sides were shaken to varying degrees, especially the Song Imperial Army in the south. Their fear of the Mongolian cavalry seemed to have been awakened, and they were in danger one after another. If this went on, the defending army would fall into disarray before the city walls could be smashed by the bombardment. In addition, the mutants only defended and did not attack. With the help of the Mongolian spies in the city, the idea of heavenly soldiers and generals was gradually collapsing. People's hearts were wavering. Everything was developing in a direction that was not favorable to the southern Song camp. The Mongolian General Boyan was very satisfied with this. He said to Zhang Hongfan with a smile, "This mutant's army looks good, but is useless. They are no match for us at all." Speaking of Boyan, he was not a simple person. Boyan grew up in the Ili Khaganate. In the early years of the Yuan dynasty, he was sent to the court by the Ili Khan Zulwu as an envoy. He was appreciated by Kublai, the founder of the Yuan dynasty. He became the left prime minister of the Secretariat and was later promoted to the director of the Privy Council. In the 11th year of the Yuan dynasty, he led the army to attack the southern Song. After the fall of the southern Song dynasty, he went to Peace Forest to quell the rebellions of the kings. After the death of Kublai, he was supported by Taimu of Yuanshang's sect to ascend to the throne. He was made the Grand Tutor and was in charge of military and state affairs. He died in the 12th month of the 31st year of the Yuan dynasty at the age of 59. He was bestowed the title of Xian Zhongzhua. He was appointed as a meritorious minister and the Grand Tutor. He was conferred the title of Prince Huai with the posthumous title of Zhongwu. Boyan was good at poetry and was a famous statesman and military strategist of the Yuan dynasty. He led 200,000 troops to fight against the Song dynasty. He successfully returned to the court. He did not say much, and his luggage was only his clothes. This person was wise and wise. He understood the principle of war and was superb in planning. He was worthy of praise by military strategists in leading, using, and managing troops. Logically speaking, such a famous general should not underestimate the enemy. However, The disparity between the performance of the mutants' army surprised Boyan and caused him to make a wrong judgment. Pass down my order. From tomorrow onwards, intensify the attack and try to break through Linen within 3 days. Since he had already figured out the enemy's strength, Boyan did not intend to dawdle anymore. He was ready to launch the strongest attack on Linen with the force of a thunderbolt. After sending out the archers, Boyan was ready to send the infantry to attack the city walls. Although the Mongolian army was mainly cavalry, during the conquest of the Southern Song dynasty, they had continuously revived the Han army. The Mongolians called them the puppet army. This batch of puppet army was mainly infantry. It's time for them to show their value. In Boyan's eyes, the puppet army was a group of cannon fodder. Whether they died or not did not affect the overall situation. The only role of the puppet army was to be thrown into the battlefield at the right time to shine and heat. Yes, sir. Zhang Hongfan received the order and went to make the arrangements very conscientiously. Boyan looked at Zhang Hongfan's back. There was a slight fluctuation in his eyes, but he immediately calmed down. Speaking of which, as the vanguard of the conquest of the Southern Song dynasty, most of this batch of puppet army was recruited by Zhang Hongfan. No matter what Zhang Hongfan's purpose was to recruit the Song army, Boyan would not allow this hidden danger to exist in the army. It was a good opportunity to wipe it out. Zhang Hongfan's indifference made Boyan think more highly of him. He is indeed an incredible person. No wonder His Majesty thinks so highly of him. Boyan narrowed his eyes, but he had no intention of getting rid of Zhang Hongfan. The reason was simple. No matter how much the emperor trusted Zhang Hongfan, a Han, he would not trust him more than Boyan, a Mongolian general who had served the Genghis Khan family for generations. Those who are not of our race will not be of the same mind. The emperor was broad-minded and accepted a large number of Han officials. He even worshipped Confucianism and wanted to rule the world with it. But at the end of the day, these were the means of the emperor. The true pillars of the empire were the Mongolians. No matter how highly the Han officials were regarded by the emperor, they were still inferior to the Mongolians. Zhang Hongfan's military exploits might be impressive, and any Mongolian nobleman would be able to trample on him when he returned to Beijing. This was why Bayan had never seen Zhang Hongfan as a threat. In history, Zhang Rou, Zhang Hongfan, and Zhang Ge, their grandfather, father, and grandson were all generals in the Yuan dynasty, and all of them had accomplished illustrious military exploits. But the fate of their descendants was extremely miserable, which seemed to confirm Boyan's judgment. After the Taiding Emperor's death, the Yuanming sect and Yuanwan sect brothers fought with the Tianshan Emperor for the throne. The supporters of the two factions fought, and the Xanadu kings defeated the Dadu king's army at Zijing Pass. When the Dadu king's army retreated, they plundered wantonly. Zhang Gui's son, Zhang Jingwu, was the Wuchang Wanhu of Baoding Road. Relying on the fact that he was a local tyrant and had been loyal to the Deyuan dynasty for 3 generations, he led the militia and killed hundreds of Yuan dynasty soldiers who were looting and plundering during the retreat. In the end, the various princes of Dada won. Prince Air's son led his army through Baoding and charged into the Zhang family courtyard. He captured Zhang Hongfan's 5 grandsons, including Zhang Jingwu, and tortured them to death. Then he handed the Zhang family's women over to the Yuan army and killed them. The only survivor of the Zhang family was Zhang Hongfan's granddaughter. Asant saw that she was beautiful, so he raped her and took her as a concubine. As traitors, the Zhang family had worked for the Mongols for many generations, but in the end, they ended up like this. How sad, how lamentable. Asant ordering his troops to rape and kill the Zhang family's women was not new practice. In the Yuan dynasty, and even before that, in the Great Mongolian Empire, sometimes the victims were Mongolians. The most famous case was a tragedy during Ogdi's reign. In the 6th month of the year 1237, there was a rumor in the Ogdi tribe that there was an edict to marry off the girls of the tribe. The people hurriedly married their daughters within the tribe, and some were directly sent to the men's families. When Ogdi heard the news, he was furious. He ordered all girls above the age of 7 to be gathered together. Those who were already married were to be taken back from their husbands' families. Then he gathered 4,000 girls in one place and ordered the soldiers to rape them in public. 2 of the girls were killed on the spot, and the rest were lined up. Some were sent to the harem. Some were rewarded to the servants. Some were sent to brothels and diplomatic residences to serve the guests, and some were taken away by the people present. Their fathers, brothers, and relatives had to stand at the side and watch. They were not allowed to complain or cry. They were different from the nomads who slaughtered cows and sheep since they were young, and they took pleasure in killing. Farmers rarely saw blood, and Buddhism was also popular in the Song dynasty. The southern Song dynasty civilization made the Han people far away from killing. Because of this, the Mongol army used psychological warfare, such as massacring the city, refining the corpse oil, and throwing the corpses into the river. It was easy to make the southern Song people fall into extreme fear. Many people died before the Mongol army arrived. Lin, the Grand Council. We can't go on like this. We have to make a change. Ouyang Shuo realized that they had fallen into the rhythm of the Mongol army. Chapter 1031. Ouyang Shuo realized that if they didn't make any changes, then the 4 shortcomings of drinking water, food, city walls, and the army, if any one of them were to have a problem, it would lead to the collapse of the army. We have to take the initiative. Guizi stood up and said, "Half of the mutant army is made up of cavalry. Using cavalry to defend the city is akin to attacking the enemy's strong point. It is unwise." Lien Pu was a general who excelled in defense. Hearing Guizi's words, he frowned and said, "The enemy is several times our number. Even if we take the initiative to attack, it won't be of much use. It will only increase our consumption. It's better to fortify the city. If it's an aimless attack, it's naturally useless. But what if it's a decapitation? Beheading?" Lien Pu almost sneered. A murderous look flashed across Guizi's eyes, full of sharpness. "Looking at the situation in the city, there's no way out if we stick to defense. We can only be surrounded and killed by the enemy. Once the city was breached, they would be at the mercy of others. On the contrary, as long as we do the opposite and dispatch elite troops to kill the enemy's great generals, such as Boyan, we can shake the enemy's morale and win the battle." Easy for you to say. Lien Pu still didn't agree. The enemy's general is heavily guarded by the army. It's very difficult to even get close to him, let alone decapitate him. They didn't want the enemy to take advantage of the gap and enter the city. It's better to defend. Lien Pu was quite experienced in defending a city. During the Battle of Chongping, when facing the Qin army of tigers and wolves, Lien Pu was able to hold his ground for several years. He had always regarded it as the proudest achievement of his life. This also showed that Lien Pu was indeed good at defense. Taking the current Battle of Lin, and as an example, the western city wall guarded by Lien Pu was the strongest one apart from the northern city wall. In Lien Pu's opinion, losing at the northern city wall was due to the difference in military strength, not because he was weaker than Guizi. The 2 generals argued incessantly, each with their own reasons. When Ouyang Shuo saw this, he suddenly glanced at Zhang Shiji and said, "If I remember correctly, General Zhang ought to have worked together with Zhang Hongfan's father, Zhang Ro, for a period of time, right?" When Zhang Shiji heard this, he thought that Ouyang Shuo was suspecting him of colluding with the enemy general, Zhang Hongfan. His face darkened. "What does Emperor Xia mean? I did serve under Zhang Ro when I was young, but that's all in the past." Ouyang Shuo smiled faintly. "General, you misunderstand. I'm not doubting you, but I have something to ask of you. During the Battle of Cliff Mountain, Zhang Hongfan had tried to use Wen Tianxiang to persuade Zhang Shiji to surrender, but had failed. How could Ouyang Shuo doubt Zhang Shiji's loyalty to the Southern Song? Zhang Shiji's expression softened, and he realized that he had overreacted. He said embarrassedly, "Emperor Xia, if there is anything you want me to do, please let me know. If I can do it, I will do it." Ever since he was conferred the title of Emperor Xia, Ouyang Shuo's words carried a lot of weight in the Grand Council. Ouyang Shuo nodded and said, "Even though General Guizi's plan is difficult, it's the only feasible plan at the moment. What we need to do now is to make the impossible possible. The others nodded in agreement. Just as General Yimpa said, the enemy commanders, be it Boyan or Zhang Hongfan, are both in the formation and hard to approach. If there's a way to lure them out, then we're halfway to success. Ouyang Shua took the opportunity to ease the tension between Lien, Pe, and Guazi. He didn't want the two generals to fall out before the battle even started. In this aspect, Ouyang Shua handled it with skill and ease. Lien Pe's expression softened. Even though he was a general under the command of Dichon, he had been fighting with the Xia kingdom for so long without a single victory. He was still very afraid of Emperor Xia, Ouyang Shua. Perhaps Lien Pe still had a trace of reverence for Ouyang Shua. Zhang Shiji was also shocked. He had a faint guess, but he wasn't sure. What does Emperor Xia mean? Ouyang Shua smiled. What I mean is very simple. Please send a letter to Zhang Hongfan, saying that we are willing to surrender with the Song army and invite them to the front of the formation for a discussion. It turned out that Ouyang Shua was planning to fake surrender. Will they believe it? Zhang Shiji asked. That depends on what you write in the letter, Zhang Shiji said. Different wording would naturally have different effects. To write a letter of surrender that Zhang Hongfan would believe without a doubt was indeed a difficult task for Zhang Shiji, a great general. Fortunately, at this moment, Lu Xiufu took the initiative to say to Zhang Shiji, Shiji, if you don't mind, after you finish writing the letter, I can help to polish it. Obviously, Lu Xiufu also agreed with this plan. That's fine. Zhang Shiji nodded. If this plan was successful, he would naturally be happy. Sending a letter to Zhang Hongfan to fake surrender was only the first part of the whole plan. To make the whole thing flawless, careful consideration and careful planning were required. The details determined the success or failure. However, once the general direction was set, many details were easy to handle. Everyone present worked together, and with Jiasu's advice, they finally came up with a detailed battle plan. Now we just have to see how Zhang Hongfan will react. Ouyang Shua looked at the military camp outside the city. His eyes squinted, and there was a hint of coldness in them. That night, Zhang Hongfan received a surrender letter from Zhang Shiji. In the letter, Zhang Shiji said, since the arrival of the mutant army, they have occupied the capital and bullied the young emperor without a leader. They have been acting arbitrarily in the city. If this goes on, the country will no longer be a country. Your army is at its peak, and breaking the city is just around the corner. However, my army and people are united, and we can only fight to the end. If your army can promise to keep the royal bloodline and protect the people of Lin, I am willing to lead my army out of the city and surrender. As for the specifics, please come to the front of the formation and discuss it in detail. Zhang Hongfan read it and was pleasantly surprised. He did not dare to make a decision on his own, so he brought Zhang Shiji's letter and paid a visit to General Bayan that very night. In the central tent, Bayan finished reading the letter. His expression did not change. He looked up and asked Zhang Hongfan, what do you think of this? Is there a trap? Bayan instinctively had some distrust towards the Han. In the eyes of the Han, the Mongolians were barbaric and uncouth, but in the eyes of the Mongolians, the Han were the representatives of evil and cunning. There was a cultural gap between the two nations. Zhang Hongfan was not a 3-year-old child. How could he be fooled? He took on the responsibility and said cautiously, this letter is indeed suspicious. We need to investigate it carefully before we can come to a conclusion. That's right. Bayan had the same idea. Then, what about tomorrow's attack? Zhang Hongfan asked carefully. As usual, Bayan did not have the slightest intention of being soft-hearted. Even if the enemy wants to surrender, we must first make them feel pain. We must make them realize that surrender is the only way out. Understood. Zhang Hongfan nodded. It was already late at night, so he immediately took his leave. But Bayan did not immediately rest. After thinking for a while, Bayan recorded tonight's events in detail. He sent someone to send it to His Majesty overnight along with a letter, waiting for His Majesty's instructions. Even if the Southern Song dynasty really wanted to surrender, Bayan could not make the decision to not massacre the city. The next day, the garrison of Lin, and did not wait for Zhang Hongfan's reply. The Mongolian army attacked the city even more fiercely. For the first time, they sent infantry to directly participate in the attack. The war became more and more tragic. There were countless casualties. In one day, more than 20,000 people died in Lin. If they continued to fight like this, the morale of the army would be disrupted before the food supply was cut off. On the contrary, the main force of the Mongolian army had not been sent out much. It was the puppet army that was used up. The so-called million-strong army only referred to the main force of the Mongolian army. It did not include the puppet army, auxiliary army, and other miscellaneous troops. Otherwise, Bayan would not have so much confidence. At 7 o'clock in the evening, the Grand Council held a regular meeting. Zhang Shiji was a little unconfident. Will the Mongolians see through our tricks? Today's Mongolian performance is normal. They can't believe it directly. In order to make the fake surrender more convincing, Ouyang Shuo and the others had other arrangements. First, the Xiao Divine Guards would take over the defense of the palace. Ouyang Shuo even swaggered in and out of the palace with his personal guards during the day. He was extremely arrogant. Second, when Tianxiang's position as the South Gate's deputy general was removed and he was transferred to the Ministry of War's assistant minister. When Tianxiang was famous for being tough. The imperial court's arrest of when Tianxiang was equivalent to giving in to the Mongolians in disguise. Third, the counterattack of the southern city wall would be reduced. Zhang Shiji made it very clear in the letter that they could not control the mutant army. Therefore, they could only promise to open the southern city gate and let the Mongolian army in. After removing Wen Tianxiang's position as the South Gate's deputy general, Zhang Shiji took the opportunity to carry out a great purge within the Great Song Imperial Army. Dozens of Wen Tianxiang's subordinates were removed from their positions and investigated. These things were done openly so that the Mongolian spies could see it. Ouyang Shuo said confidently, "There should be a turn for the better by the day after tomorrow." After all, Lin was not a pushover. If the Mongolian army wanted to attack Lin, they could not afford the price. If there was a shortcut, Boyan would not be able to resist it. Then let's do it this way. Let's hold on for another 2 days. Lu Xiufu concluded. Because it was only a regular meeting, everyone dispersed after the meeting. In the main tent of the army camp outside the city, night fell and the entire camp was plunged into darkness. Only the sparse light from the torches echoed the few rare rays of starlight in the sky. The night wind blew and the light swayed. It was blurry as if it could be extinguished at any time. It was swallowed by the endless darkness, making people panic. The Mongolian military discipline was strict. At night, the huge camp was silent. The main tent was brightly lit. Outside the tent were Mongolian warriors in black iron armor. They were Boyan's bodyguards. These bodyguards were the best of the best in the Mongolian grasslands. Each of them had extraordinary skills. The Mongolians did not have any smelting technology. Their armor was mainly leather. Only the generals in the army had the opportunity to wear iron armor. These bodyguards were all wearing armor. First, it showed that Boyan's status was extraordinary. Second, it was also because the Mongolian army went south and looted the wealth of the Central Plains. In the center of the tent, there was a plate of charcoal. The firewood crackled and sparks flew. Boyan was dressed in regular clothes. He sat behind the table and carefully read the information sent by the secret agents in the city. Nothing big or small in Lin and could escape Boyan's eyes. Do you believe it or not? For the first time, Boyan was in a dilemma. Chapter 1032. Although Bayan was already 70% convinced, he still decided to delay for another day. On the second day, the siege became more and more intense. Both sides gave it their all. Bayan sent all the puppet troops regardless of the casualties. He was determined to use this batch of cannon fodder to their fullest potential. The Southern Song's camp did not dare to be negligent and fought back resolutely. As dusk fell, Linen was once again surrounded by rivers of blood and corpses. It was a ghastly sight. The Southern Song's camp paid the price of nearly 30,000 casualties. Not only did they clear out all the forts, but they also annihilated all the Mongolian puppet troops. When the sick cat showed its might, its lethality was astonishing. Although Bayan's original goal was to eliminate the puppet troops, he was still shocked to see them all die in battle. Bayan didn't dare to be careless with the strength of the mutants. That night, Zhang Hongfan received the second letter from Zhang Shiji. The content of the letter was very simple. There was only one short sentence. Since your army is not willing to accept our surrender, then we can only fight to the death. We swear to live and die with Linen. See you on the battlefield. It seemed that Zhang Shiji had completely given up on the idea of surrendering. After reading it, Bayan felt relieved. He smiled and said to Zhang Hongfan, "You can talk to them now." Early this morning, Kublai had sent a reply to Boyan, giving him full authority to negotiate with the Southern Song. Therefore, Bayan didn't need to ask for instructions. Zhang Hongfan nodded. "Remember, let the Southern Song send a powerful minister out of the city to negotiate. Also, only 200 people can go out of the city." Bayan was still very cautious. Understood. On the 16th day of the battle. This day was still filled with the flames of war, and the fighting was fierce. After replying to Zhang Shiji, Bayan didn't call a truce in order to cover it up. He only agreed to secretly negotiate the surrender in the southern suburbs in the evening. In the morning, in a secluded house in the west of the city. Also to cover it up, the members of the Grand Council chose this secret location for the meeting. Before the meeting started, the atmosphere in the room was a bit heavy. Because it was a fake surrender, according to Bayan's request, going out of the city to negotiate would put one's life in danger. The only powerful ministers that Bayan mentioned were Lu Xiufu, Zhang Shiji, and Wen Tianxiang. Now that Wen Tianxiang had been sidelined, only Lu and Zhang were left. "I'll go," Zhang Shiji said. "I wrote the letter, so I have a good reason to go out of the city to negotiate." Lu Xiufu firmly shook his head. "It's not appropriate for you to go. The army can't do without you. Let me go." Zhang Shiji wanted to say something else, but Lu Xiufu cut him off and continued, "Negotiations are the work of civil officials, and I'm duty-bound to do so. General, there's no need to say anything more." Regardless of their abilities, the three heroes of the late Song dynasty were worthy of respect. Lu Xiufu, on the other hand, was calm. He said with a smile, "Now that I've done something important for the imperial court, I can die in peace." Ouyang Shua couldn't help but sigh with emotion. He couldn't imagine what Lu Xiufu was thinking when he carried the young emperor and jumped into the sea. Xiongba glanced at Ouyang Shua. For the first time, he agreed with Ouyang Shua's willfulness. Seeing that Lu Xiufu had made up his mind, and that no one present was an ordinary person, they calmed themselves down and began to confirm the details of this decapitation operation. Ouyang Shua originally wanted to arrange 200 divine guards to protect Lu Xiufu, but on second thought, the divine guard were too conspicuous and might be seen through by Bayan. In the end, he could only give up. Whether Lu Xiufu could survive this calamity was up to the heavens. Soon it was evening. The orange-red sun hung in the sky, and the gorgeous color grew fainter and fainter. A flock of vultures circled in the sky, letting out ear-piercing screeches that annoyed people. Once the military order was given, the mighty Mongolian army retreated like the tide, leaving behind tens of thousands of corpses and a broken and dirty battlefield. Suddenly, a side door in the south opened from the inside. Lu Xiufu, the prime minister of the Southern Song dynasty, quietly left the city under the protection of 200 imperial guards of the Great Song. They hadn't gone far when a group of Mongolian cavalrymen came toward them. After verifying their identities, they continued to lead them forward. Bayan and his group were already waiting on a flat ground in the southern suburbs. Seeing that the Southern Song dynasty followed the agreement and really only sent 200 soldiers to protect them, Bayan finally smiled. If they could successfully persuade the Southern Song dynasty to surrender, Bayan's credit would be added to his glorious record. After the personnel of both sides met each other, they officially entered the negotiation. Everything looked very normal, But little did they know that the current situation in Lin was already very different. According to the plan, in the west, Lien Pa, the commander of the West Gate, would personally lead 50,000 elite cavalrymen and quietly gather near the three western gates. In the east, Zhao Zhuang, the deputy commander of the East Gate, would lead 50,000 elite cavalrymen and also gather near the city gates. Then there was the north. Eli led 30,000 elite cavalrymen of the 4th Imperial Guard Corps and 30,000 elite cavalrymen of Luofeng City. A total of 60,000 elite cavalrymen quietly gathered in the south. In the south, Zhang Shiji, the commander of the South Gate, led the only 20,000 cavalrymen of the Great Song, ready to set off. For this decapitation operation, the Southern Song Dynasty's camp sent a total of 180,000 cavalrymen, almost wiping out all the cavalrymen in the city. They had to achieve the greatest results and complete the counterattack. Such a large military operation naturally alarmed the Mongolian spies lurking in Lin. Unfortunately, Lin had already been under martial law, and Mongolian spies could not send information outside the city. At 5:30, when the time came like a starting gun, the east, west, and west gates of Lin opened at the same time. The 180,000 elite cavalrymen of the Southern Song Dynasty's camp divided into 3 groups and killed their way out of the city. The horses' hooves were hurried, rolling up smoke and dust. At this time, the sky was beautiful and the sunset was high, casting a dazzling red light, extremely dazzling. In the south, Eli, riding the spiritual beast Rakshasa, led the elite cavalrymen of the Imperial Guard Corps and walked in front of the team. After leaving the city, he did not think twice and went straight to the negotiation place between the two sides. Zhang Shiji led the rear army, forming a fan shape, and followed closely behind the vanguard. After leaving the city, the cavalrymen of the east and west made a big turn and turned to the south, like 2 big arcs, forming a semicircle, weaving a big net. In the south gate, General Wu Qi was ordered to command the 3 armies to complete the encirclement. Once the encirclement was formed, Boyan would not be able to escape even if he had wings. The long-distance encirclement tactic was originally a masterpiece of the Mongolians, but now it was used by the Southern Song Dynasty to deal with them. When the Southern Song cavalry left the city, the Mongolian army, who had just retreated from the front lines, was resting in their tents, preparing to eat. Seeing the cavalry suddenly leave the city, the Mongolian cavalrymen in charge of guarding the perimeter were completely stunned. In their impression, the Mongolians were always the ones who initiated the attack. They had never seen any city that dared to voluntarily leave the city under the repeated attacks of the Mongolian army. But even though they were stunned, the patrolling troops' reaction was not slow at all. They sent people to warn the camp, and at the same time, they turned their horses around and met the Southern Song cavalry. Of course, it was like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. The Mongolian cavalry was powerful, but that was only when they were on a large scale. The mere patrolling troops could not do anything in front of a cavalry of at least 50,000. Before the two sides even got close, the patrolling troops were completely annihilated, all shot down from their horses. The cavalry on the 2 flanks did not stop at all and continued to rush south, determined to complete the encirclement. When the Southern Song cavalry was far away, the Mongolian army, who had just received the news, sent out the vanguard. Looking at the billowing smoke, they could only eat dirt, unable to catch up. The entire Mongolian camp was in chaos, and the southern side was even more chaotic. Bian was a cautious man. Even though Lu Xiufu had really only brought 200 men out of the city as promised, Bian was still worried and set up 3 sentry posts along the way. Not long after the evil battalion left the city, they were discovered by the sentry posts and immediately warned. Bian's face turned from sunny to gloomy when he received the report. He said to Lu Xiufu darkly, "Fine, you dare to play tricks. I'll take your life first." As he spoke, he had already drawn the scimitar at his waist. Lu Xiufu pretended to be surprised and said hoarsely, "What happened?" Keep pretending, keep pretending." Bian gnashed his teeth. Do you really think that you could defeat us with just a surprise attack? Seeing that Lu Xiufu was really at a loss, Zhang Hongfan said, Lord Lu, you are still negotiating with us, and now the cavalry is charging out of the city. It is obvious that they want to kill you. At this time, neither Bian nor Zhang Hongfan knew that the Southern Song army had actually come out in full force. They still thought that it was just the vanguard of the evil battalion, so they didn't panic. Lu Xiufu's expression changed. General, you misunderstand. I believe that it is definitely not the Song Imperial Army. Perhaps the mutants have found out that we are about to surrender, and they have come out of the city for revenge. Bian and Zhang Hongfan looked at each other. They couldn't immediately tell whether Lu Xiufu was telling the truth or not, because according to the reports from the scouts, it was indeed the mutants' army that was charging over. Detain them first and prepare for battle. Bian was very decisive, and he quickly came up with an idea. With a single order, the 200 Song Imperial Army soldiers were all captured by Bian's bodyguards. As they spoke, the vanguard of the evil battalion had already broken through the 2 sentry posts and was heading straight for the negotiation. How can they be so fast? Bian's heart trembled, and for the first time, he felt a hint of satisfaction. The battle between the two sides had been limited to the top of the city walls, and the cavalry of the mutants' army had never had a chance to enter the battlefield. As soon as they appeared, they suppressed the Mongolian cavalry. As an experienced general, from the speed of the enemy's attack, Bian could vaguely tell that the attacking force was probably even stronger than the Mongolian cavalry. This conclusion was enough to topple Bian's worldview. Ever since Genghis Khan unified the Mongolian plains, the Mongolian cavalry had swept through the Eurasian continent and had never met a worthy opponent. In the hearts of the Mongolians, their cavalry had long been the symbol of invincibility. Now that such a cavalry had suddenly appeared, how could Bian not be shocked? Zhang Hongfan saw that his commander was hesitating, so he patted his horse and walked over. He said in a low voice, Marshal, we don't know how many enemies there are, and their arrival is too sudden. We don't know if it's a trap. Why don't we temporarily hide and figure out the enemy situation before making our plans? Zhang Hongfan's plan was considered a safe one. Bian's expression flickered, and he couldn't make up his mind. Chapter 1033. Bo Yin thought about it for a moment, but he still did not want to retreat just like that. Retreating without a fight was a great humiliation to the Mongolian warriors, and Bo Yin could not accept it. Assemble the troops and prepare to meet the enemy. Bian ordered. Zhang Hongfan had no choice but to obey. When the Mongolians attacked Linen this time, they claimed that they had 1,000,000 soldiers, but only 600,000 soldiers left their 6 bases. After a series of battles, apart from the puppet army, another 100,000 soldiers died in battle. Currently, apart from the 200,000 troops guarding the north, there were only 100,000 troops stationed on the other 3 sides. This also meant that even if Bian gathered the entire southern army, he would only be able to gather 100,000 men. Moreover, the army had just withdrawn from the front lines and returned to their camps. It would be extremely difficult to gather a large army. Time was of the essence, so Zhang Hongfan could only gather 10,000 elite cavalrymen, including his and Boyan's personal guards. Otherwise, they might not even be able to gather 10,000 men. It's enough. Boyan, on the other hand, was brimming with confidence. In his opinion, as long as the first wave of the enemy's attack was blocked, the follow-up troops would quickly assemble and complete the counter-encirclement. It was still unknown who would emerge victorious. While Zhang Hongfan was mobilizing his troops, the Evil Cometh division had already broken through the last barrier. Bian and the rest could already see the silhouettes of the enemy. The golden dragon flag of Great Xia fluttered in the wind and was extremely eye-catching. Just as Boyan was about to give the order to charge, a petite messenger suddenly ran in from the side. Panting heavily, he said, reporting to the commander-in-chief, there is urgent military news. The east and west wings have sent out an early warning, saying that a large number of cavalrymen have suddenly left the city of Lin and are attacking from the south. We asked the commander-in-chief to take precautions. What? Boyan's heart trembled, his expression changing drastically as he forcefully pulled on the reins. Gazing at the clearly visible enemy troops, Boyan's expression was extremely ugly. Even if he wanted to retreat now, it was too late. Within such a short period of time, even if the Mongolian cavaliers were well-trained, they could not immediately turn around and retreat. If they were to retreat in a hurry, once the enemy attacked at the right time, their formation would be thrown into chaos, and that would be a disaster. What was worse was that once they retreated, the camp behind them would suffer as well. The slightest mishap would result in a complete defeat. As expected of a famous general in the Mongolian army, Boyan soon understood the pros and cons of the situation. He had no choice but to bite the bullet. As the saying goes, when two enemies meet on a narrow path, the braver one wins. The only thing they could do now was to withstand the first wave of the enemy's attack and wait for the main army to assemble at the camp before making further plans. Everyone charge! Boyan hurriedly issued the military order. For a moment, the rumbling sound of horse hooves resounded, and the earth shook. Under the orange glow of the sunset, the two cavalry units charged at each other, ready to fight to the death. Perhaps it was just an illusion, but at this moment, even the sunset glow became enchanting and hung the color of blood. Boyan did not charge forward. He remained where he was, protected by his bodyguards. While commanding the frontline troops, he also urgently mobilized the rear troops to quickly assemble the troops in the south. The one leading the charge was a Mongolian general, while Zhang Hongfan was ordered to gather his troops at the back. In the process of charging, the fierce General Eli wielded a pair of iron halberds and rode on the Rakshasa, revealing a bloodthirsty smile. He aimed at the enemy's commander and lightly tapped the Rakshasa with his right boot. Receiving the order, the Rakshasa suddenly sprinted forward. The man and beast worked well together. The speed of the Rakshasa's charge obviously surprised the enemy. In that instant, Eli had already skillfully waved his two iron halberds. With a sound, before the enemy could react, he was directly cut in half, and blood splattered everywhere. The Rakshasa was drenched, but he did not care at all. A red glow flashed in his eyes. This was really an evil beast, and only a ruthless person like Eli could subdue it. As soon as they started fighting, Eli killed the enemy's general. This time, the charging Imperial Guard's morale soared, and they all charged forward while howling. On the contrary, the originally arrogant Mongolian cavalry lost their courage. This was the first time they saw cavalry that was even more ferocious than them. The Mongolian cavalry was mainly light cavalry, and because they were skilled with bows and horses, they could shoot arrows on horseback regardless of whether they were attacking or retreating. Throughout the entire battle, the rain of arrows would not stop. On the contrary, they were not very good at charging between cavalry. Disregarding everything else, just the armor alone was a huge difference, not to mention the machetes used by the Mongolian cavalry. In the face of the Great Xia Imperial Guard's lances, the machetes were like toys. They were not on the same level at all. As soon as the two sides started fighting, it was obvious who was stronger. Under the charge of the 30,000 Great Xia Imperial Guards, the 10,000 Mongolian cavalry's formation was immediately messed up. With Eli as the leader, the Great Xia cavalry directly tore the Mongolian formation into pieces and did not stop as they continued to charge forward. As for the Mongolian cavalry that crossed their path, the rear army would take care of them. One must not forget that behind Eli were the 30,000 cavalry from Luofeng City and 20,000 cavalry from Great Song. They might not be as good as the Great Xia Imperial Guards in a head-on charge, but they could still take care of the remaining survivors. Eli was the core of this beheading operation, and before they set off, Ouyang Shua had already told him that the success of killing Boyan depended on Eli. Eli did not want to disappoint the king. After tearing apart the enemy's defensive line, be it Eli or the Rakshasa beneath him, they were covered in blood. They were like evil gods that walked out of hell, looking extremely ferocious. Eli did not care at all. He stared ahead and quickly searched for his target. Very soon, Boyan, who was retreating under the protection of his personal guards, entered Eli's line of sight. "Haha, Boyan, don't run. Eli is here. Leave your puny life behind." Eli's eyes lit up, and the Rakshasa beneath him did not need to be commanded at all as it directly pounced forward. On his warhorse, Boyan took the time to glance at the chaotic scene behind him. His expression was extremely ugly. He never expected the enemy to be so powerful that they could tear apart the Mongolian army's defensive line in a single round. This was something that had never happened in any of the previous battles. This time, Boyan was truly frightened out of his wits. He did not dare to stay any longer. Under the protection of his personal guards, he fled pathetically to the rear in preparation to rendezvous with the main forces. He did not know how many troops Zhang Hongfan had gathered. At that moment, Eli's roar came from behind him. In the game, Gaia had its own translation system. Although Boyan was Mongolian, he could understand Eli's words, and his expression turned increasingly ugly. As one of the few generals in the Mongolian army, Boyan did not lack the courage to fight the enemy. He wished he could immediately turn his horse around and fight the big guy behind him. However, as a commander, his rationality reminded Boyan that he could not do so. The aggrieved Boyan could only whip his horse continuously and increase his speed to escape. However, the faster Boyan fled, the louder Eli's roar became. The Mongolian warhorses were not very tall, but they were known for their endurance. They had made great contributions in the Mongolian expeditions to the west, but in terms of speed, they did not have any advantage over the green beetle warhorses that the Great Xia Imperial Guards rode. On the contrary, they were at a disadvantage because the green beetle warhorses were known for their speed. Seeing that Boyan was not far ahead, Eli could not hold it in any longer and immediately activated his general specialty. As such, the speed of the Great Xia Imperial Guards, who were already moving like the wind, increased once again. They approached Boyan and company at a speed visible to the naked eye. When Eli saw this, he could not help but grin. He was not far from completing his mission. At that moment, the rumbling of hooves came from ahead. It was Zhang Hongfan leading his troops to provide support. Before he arrived, a wave of arrows had already rained down on the Great Xia Imperial Guards. Shooting arrows while advancing was the forte of the Mongolian cavalry. When Boyan saw this, he heaved a sigh of relief inwardly as he revealed a look of relief after surviving calamity. If he would really be caught by the enemy behind him, no matter how valiant he was, he would not be able to withstand so many attacks. He would probably be doomed. When Eli saw this, his eyes were filled with indignation. The enemy's arrows rained down on them with extraordinary power. A few of the Imperial Guards beside Eli were instantly killed, and they were thrown into a complete mess. Zhang Hongfan's goal was very simple. He wanted to use the rain of arrows to stop the Great Xia Imperial Guards from advancing and save Boyan and company. No, I can't let all my previous efforts go to waste. Eli was not someone who would give up easily. A fierce glint flashed in his eyes as he roared, "Everyone, speed up and charge." Eli. At the crucial moment, Eli did not retreat, but advanced instead. He braved the enemy's rain of arrows and took the lead. Seeing how valiant their commander was, the Great Xia Imperial Guards were completely enraged. All of them roared as they charged forward, completely ignoring the rain of arrows raining down on them. This time, Zhang Hongfan and Boyan were completely dumbfounded. They had never seen such a fearless army in the world. "Quick, go forward and provide support to the commander." Zhang Hongfan did not dare to delay. He patted his warhorse and charged forward. If Boyan died, according to the Mongolian military rules, even if Zhang Hongfan survived, he would be beheaded by Kublai. Hence, no matter how difficult it was, Zhang Hongfan had to brace himself and charge forward. Zhang Hongfan's reaction was not slow, but Eli was even faster. In just a few blinks of an eye, Eli finally caught up to Boyan and company with the help of his general specialty. He raised the two metal halberds in his hands and slashed down. "Protect the commander." Seeing this, Boyan's bodyguards all disregarded their own safety and formed a human wall behind Boyan. Eli's expression did not change. With the help of the Rakshasa, heads would fall wherever the halberds fell. Even the powerful Boyan's bodyguards were no different from chickens and dogs in front of Eli. At this moment, the great Xia Imperial Guards had also caught up. Seeing this, Eli did not waste any more time. He directly went around Boyan's bodyguards and chased forward. Soon, Boyan was about to meet up with the main force. However, Eli did not waver at all. The Rakshasa under him seemed to have sensed its master's desire. Although it had already run for a long distance, it charged forward again. With a whoosh, the Rakshasa crossed the distance of nearly 10 meters with Eli and instantly arrived behind Boyan. "Commander, be careful." Seeing this, Zhang Hongfan and the others were furious. Boyan subconsciously turned his head and saw a pitch-black metal halberd growing larger and larger at his eyes. Pucci! Boyan did not even have time to react before his head was struck by Eli's metal halberd. Blood and brain matter splattered everywhere. With a boom, Boyan fell off his warhorse. A famous general of a generation had actually died in the hands of Eli. Chapter 1034. It was a huge blow to the Mongolian army to witness the tragic death of their commander-in-chief. Before they could recover from the shock, the evil demons who had caught up to them made a new move. Kill! Seeing how mighty their commander was, the great Xia Imperial Guards at the back were completely fired up. Their faces were flushed with excitement, and they increased their speed to charge. They wanted to continue working hard and break through the enemy's rear in one fell swoop. This battle was getting more and more intense. The morale of the great Xia Imperial Guards was high, but the Mongolian army was a little timid. The repeated attacks continuously weakened the Mongolian cavaliers' confidence. In particular, Boyan's tragic death was a huge blow to their hearts. Such a powerful commander-in-chief was actually killed by the enemy's commander. Without a leader and dispirited, could the Mongolian army still stop the charge of the great Xia Imperial Guards? Zhang Hongfan, the commander of the Yuan army, had an extremely unpleasant expression on his face. The moment Boyan died, his fate seemed to have been sealed. The problem was, what should he do next? Due to the urgency of providing reinforcements, Zhang Hongfan only had the time to gather 20,000 troops before rushing over to provide reinforcements. The reinforcements were still gathering at the campsite, and it would take some time for them to arrive. Just as Boyan had predicted, Zhang Hongfan thought that the 10,000 elite cavaliers would be able to hold off the enemy for half an hour, which would be enough for him to rush over with reinforcements. Who would have thought that the armored cavaliers with his personal guards would be defeated by the enemy with a single attack? At the thought of this, Zhang Hongfan could not help but feel chills run down his spine. Chills ran up from the soles of his feet to his heart, making him shudder. The great Xia Imperial Guards did not give Zhang Hongfan too much time to think. The armored cavaliers charged at high speed like bolts of lightning, galloping through the wilderness at lightning speed. They let out deafening rumbles and carried with them a boundless fighting spirit and murderous aura as they whizzed past. Wherever the army passed, everything died. Before the Mongolian soldiers could collect the corpse of their commander-in-chief, Boyan's corpse was stepped on by the great Xia Imperial Guards and turned into a pile of meat paste. At this moment, a gust of cold wind swept through the night sky. The black capes of the great Xia Imperial Guards fluttered in the cold wind, and the red tassels on their obsidian helmets swayed with the wind, becoming the brightest color in the night sky. Speaking of which, this armor tassel was not just a decoration. It was very useful on the battlefield. For example, Eli was charging at the front, and the great Xia Imperial Guards at the back could clearly see the direction of the attack through the tassels of their helmets. They could even sense the direction of the wind through the movement of the tassels. In the blink of an eye, the two troops were like two torrents that charged at each other. Due to Zhang Hongfan's days, the Mongolian cavaliers no longer had a unified command. Some of the soldiers charged forward and were prepared to fight to the death, while some quietly turned their horses around and were prepared to retreat. The entire battlefield was thrown into chaos. At this moment, the orange sun finally set below the horizon, taking away the last of the sunset glow. the world darkened, as if it couldn't bear to see the slaughter on the ground below. Strangely enough, the moment the sun set, a huge bright moon hung high in the night sky, emitting a gentle and bright pale moonlight that continued to illuminate the earth. This was a disaster for the Mongolian army. The night was no longer their amulet. On the contrary, the pale moonlight became the best source of light for the Imperial Guards of Great Xia. Under the moonlight, the Great Xia Imperial Guards charged back and forth among the Mongolian army like ghosts. In less than 3 rounds, the Mongolian cavaliers who had gathered together in a hurry were defeated by the Great Xia Imperial Guards again, and they fled in all directions. Whoosh! Eli, who was covered in blood, exhaled. He was drenched in sweat, and the shirt under his armor was already drenched. Even as brave as he was, he still felt incredibly tired after the continuous battles. This was especially so when he killed 2 Mongolian generals in succession. It might seem easy, but in truth, he had drained Eli's stamina. When Eli saw this, he waved his hand and gestured for his army to stop chasing after the Mongolian soldiers. They were to rest and reorganize themselves on the spot while they adjusted their formation. The continuous battles were also a great burden on the Great Xia Imperial Guards, especially on the war horses under the soldiers. They were already panting heavily from the intense battle, and some of them were already foaming at the mouth. If they did not rest and reorganize themselves, they would die of exhaustion. Send a signal flare to the city. Tell them that Boyan is dead and the enemy's front lines have been defeated. Tell them what we should do next. Should we continue attacking the military camp, or should we retreat? Eli ordered. The military order sounded complicated, but in fact, it was a pre-agreed secret signal. First, a red signal flare was sent into the sky, which meant that the decapitation mission was completed. Then, 2 yellow signal flare were sent into the sky, which meant that the front lines had been set. Lin and City, South City Tower. Other than the temporary commander-in-chief Wu Qi, Ouyang Shaw, Xiongba, Wen Tianxiang, and other members of the Grand Council were also here. Looking at the red signal flare that was sent into the sky in the southern suburbs, Ouyang Shua's face showed a satisfied expression. Eli really did not let him down. He won the battle. The Great Xia Imperial Guard are indeed worthy of their reputation. Xiongba smiled and complimented. When Tianxiang unconsciously clenched his fists, his face was full of excitement and emotion. His whole body was trembling, and his gaze towards Ouyang Shua contained a hint of respect. The valiance of the mutant army had completely subdued Wen Tianxiang. Ouyang Shua smiled and turned to look at Wu Qi. He said, Boyan is dead, and the Mongolian front lines have been defeated. This is the best time to expand the victory. What do you think, General? Since Wu Qi was appointed as the commander-in-chief, Ouyang Shua naturally had to give Wu Qi enough respect. Wu Qi nodded and said, Emperor Xia is right. It is also God's will to destroy the Mongolians. Now that the moon is hanging high in the sky, we can fight together. With Boyan dead, the enemy will definitely be without a leader. We should attack together. General, rest assured and give the order. Ouyang Shua smiled. Wu Qi nodded and began to arrange. Since Boyan was dead, there was no need for the East and West armies to surround the enemy. Wu Qi ordered the 2 armies to immediately turn back and kill the enemy. Eli led the southern army and continued to move south. He wanted to flatten the entire Mongolian southern camp. Other than dispatching the cavalry troops outside the city, Wu Qi also mobilized the 4 armies in the city to attack together with the cavalry troops to complete the strangulation of the Mongolian camp. To be honest, this was a little risky. After all, it was a battle at night. But if it was successful, the rewards would be far beyond expectations. Ouyang Shua saw this, but he did not say anything to stop it. Desperate times called for desperate measures. The current results were not enough to completely turn the tide of the war. The main force of the Mongolian army was still there, and it was not damaged. Therefore, they had to continue to expand the victory, and it had to be fast. Now that the Mongolian army was without a leader, it was a good opportunity to attack. They could continue to magnify the enemy's fear and finally force the enemy to collapse. Otherwise, if the pressure from the southern Song camp was not strong enough, or if they let their guard down, the Mongolian army would be able to recover, and all their previous efforts would be wasted. Wu Qi was indeed a heavenly general. He could see the entire battlefield clearly. In less than 5 minutes, a new military order was sent through the signal flares. This was also a secret weapon of the mutant army. Otherwise, it would be impossible to send military orders in a night like this. With the military order, the 180,000 cavalrymen from the southern Song camp used the moonlight to start a massacre in the wilderness. Eli led the 30,000 great Xia Imperial Guards as the vanguard. Zhang Shiji led the 50,000 cavalrymen behind him. The vast army rushed into the Mongolian southern camp like a tide. At this moment, the southern camp was already in a mess. Because of the defeated soldiers at the front line, the soldiers of the southern camp already knew that Marshal Boyan had died in battle. Just now, General Zhang Hongfan was lost in the chaos. Coupled with the 2 consecutive defeats, the continuous attacks caused the soldiers of the southern camp to almost collapse. The southern camp was like a group of dragons without a leader. Under the assault of the army led by Eli, the fate of the southern camp could already be foreseen. It was only a matter of time before the southern camp collapsed. During the battle, there were already Mongolian cavalrymen fleeing towards the eastern and western camps in an attempt to take refuge. Eli saw this, but did not stop them. If these soldiers fled to the eastern and western camps, not only would it not help the situation, it would also spread the news of fear and misery, causing chaos in the 4 camps. At the same time, the cavalry led by Lin Pe and Zhao Zhuang were about to surround the southern Mongolian camp when they received an order from the top of the city wall to turn back and attack the cavalry. With a complicated expression, Lin Pe looked at the southern barracks from afar, where the sounds of killing had already reached the heavens. He pulled on the reins and said in a deep voice, "Pass down my order. The front line will become the rear, and the rear will become the front line. The target is the enemy's west barracks." "Yes, sir." Lin Pe was a proud old general and did not want the great Xia Imperial Guards to dominate the front. On a night of slaughter like this, the army of Handan City should not remain silent. Behind them, the Mongolian cavalry of the western camp was still far behind. A battle under the moonlight was inevitable. The cavalry of the eastern camp, led by Zhao Zhuang, was similar to Lin Pe, full of fighting spirit. The news of Boyan's death quickly spread to the eastern and western camps, and even to the farthest northern camp, completely shaking the will of the Mongolian army to resist. Should they send out the army to take revenge for their commander or guard the camp until daybreak? No one could give a clear answer. Everyone could only fight their own battles. Some chose to attack, some chose to defend. Some camps even had internal conflicts due to differences of opinion. Just as the Mongolian army was hesitating, the 4 gates of Lin were opened once again. Almost all the guards in the city came out and attacked the eastern and western camps. That's right. Wu Qi was not stupid and understood the principle of surround 3 and leave 1 less. He only mobilized his troops to attack the 3 camps, but let the Mongolian northern camp go. This would only hasten the defeat of the Mongolian army because they still had a way out. This night was destined to be chaotic. Under the night sky, the sounds of killing, the sound of horses' hooves, and the roars of the soldiers mixed together, stirring up the originally peaceful night. No one could sleep in peace. In the second half of the night, the eastern, western, and southern camps were all set ablaze. The southern Song army took advantage of the chaos to set fire to the enemy camp. Just as Wu Qi expected, because Boyan and Zhang Hongfan were not in the northern camp and it was nighttime, the soldiers of the northern camp did not dare to leave their camp and chose to defend the camp conservatively. The blazing fire illuminated half the sky. Shrill screams could be heard from the fire, but the fire swayed in the night wind and completely blurred the faces of the people. On such a strange night, who can see the road ahead? Chapter 1035. Early in the morning, when the first ray of sunlight shone on the northern suburbs of Lin, the North Camp Mongol army who had been suffering all night, was ready to rush out of the camp and teach the Southern Song a lesson. When he came out, he found that the army of the Southern Song dynasty that had stirred up trouble last night and started a massacre in the suburbs had already retreated like a tide, leaving only the ruins. When he looked over, there were no longer any living Mongolian cavaliers in his field of vision. The barracks in the east, west, and south were still burning with raging fires. Yurts were burnt to ashes, and the barracks were scorched. Black smoke curled up, and corpses were everywhere. It was an indescribable desolation. The masterless warhorse neighed and guarded its owner's corpse, unwilling to leave for a long time. The soldiers of the North Camp stared blankly at everything in front of them, their eyes filled with anger and confusion. What should they do after this battle? Should they continue to attack the city or retreat? At this moment, only His Majesty could make a decision. Return to camp and await further orders. The Deputy General of the North Barracks led the way back to the camp. Based on the Mongolians' temperament, this battle will not end here since both sides have formed such a deep grudge. Once Lin was breached, it was imperative to massacre the entire city. At dawn, the massacre that lasted for an entire night came to an end. The 3 Mongolian camps were completely routed, and the soldiers who survived either fled to the North Camp or to the base. The cavalry of the Southern Song camp chased after them all night. Because of the frequent killing, many of the soldiers' weapons were bent. The corpses of Mongolian cavaliers could be seen everywhere in the wild. There was no such thing as a captive in this war. They would either die or live. There was no third choice. When the army returned to the city, it immediately set off waves. Victory! In this battle, not only did the Southern Song's camp kill the enemy's General Boyan and defeat the Mongolian army, they also seized a large amount of provisions from the Mongolian camp, which greatly alleviated the food crisis in Lenin. Most of the Mongolian turnback cannons were also destroyed in this battle. When the news that Boyan had been killed by Eli spread, the whole city was in an uproar. As the main general who destroyed the Southern Song, Boyan's hands were stained with the blood of too many Han people. In Lenin alone, many people's family members had died directly or indirectly in the hands of Boyan. With Boyan's death, the common people naturally applauded and celebrated. Some families took the initiative to set off firecrackers to celebrate. Of course, the good news was also mixed with the bad news. Last night, Prime Minister Liu Xiufu had unfortunately passed away. When a Mongolian soldier in charge of Liu Xiufu found out that Boyan had been killed, he was so enraged that he killed Liu Xiufu and his group. As soon as the news came out, Lenin City could be said to be full of sorrow and joy. As the prime minister of the last generation of the Southern Song dynasty, Liu Xiufu's death was definitely a great loss to the imperial court. The 8-year-old emperor, Zhao Kuang, was sobbing and begging for Mr. Liu. Liu Xiufu sacrificed his life for the country and deserved to be remembered by future generations. Lenin City, North City Tower. Although Liu Xiufu's death brought a trace of sadness to Lin and City, a great victory was still a great victory. Soon, from the civil and military officials of the imperial court to the common people, everyone was cheering. As far as they were concerned, the defense of Lin was already a sure thing. Some officials were even thinking of taking the initiative to attack again, to wipe out the remaining bandits and recover the lost land. Of course, these officials were just bragging. They definitely wouldn't dare to go into battle. Early in the morning, accompanied by Jia Su and Su Chu, Ouyang Shua ascended the North Tower and gazed into the distance. Every move of the Mongolian North Camp was seen by Ouyang Shua. Seeing that the enemy of the North Camp had regrouped, Ouyang Shua's expression became more and more solemn. Ouyang Shua wasn't blindly confident. The Mongolians were definitely not pushovers. Last night, they were only caught off guard. The Mongolian army was said to have 1 million soldiers. Not to mention the other 6 bases, there were still 400,000 soldiers left. Furthermore, last night was chaotic and many Mongolian soldiers escaped. Together with the North Camp, the combined strength of these forces was still terrifying. In last night's battle, the Southern Song dynasty's camp did suffer losses. The Mongolian cavalry might be afraid of the great Xia Imperial Guards, but it was a different story in other places. The specific battle report hadn't been compiled yet, but a conservative estimate said that at least 30,000 people had died. To kill 1,000 enemies, we have to suffer 800 casualties. Of course, after last night's battle, the overall situation of the Southern Song Dynasty's camp was much better than before. Ouyang Shual looked at the land in the north. His gaze seemed to pass through the void and look at the Sanha city in the north. That was where Kublai's golden tent was. It's time for the final battle. For some reason, Ouyang Shual was suddenly filled with battle intent, and his blood was boiling. He wanted to personally go into battle with the legendary Yuan Shizu. Perhaps it was because of Ouyang Shual's ethnic complex. On the 17th day of the battle, Sanha City. Among the 6 bases that surrounded Lin, Sanha City was the most heavily guarded. Half of the 400,000 Mongolian soldiers were stationed around Sanha City to protect their emperor. In the center of the city stood a huge golden tent. The surrounding buildings had been swept away to accommodate this golden tent. It was completely out of place with the overall architectural style of the city. In the luxurious golden tent, Kublai didn't sleep the entire night. The continuous bad news made the founding emperor of the Yuan dynasty fly into a rage. He was like a ferocious beast that no one dared to go near him. Since last night, 3 servants serving Kublai had been beaten to death for no reason. The entire Sanha city was shrouded in a terrifying atmosphere. No matter who it was, they were all very careful, afraid that they would anger the emperor in the golden tent. The surviving Han citizens in the city were even more terrified. They couldn't sleep and hid in their homes, not daring to go out. Who knew what the Mongolians would do to them when they were enraged? Around 9 in the morning, the sound of horses galloping could be heard on the road to the south of Sanha City. Looking up, it was a small group of Mongolian cavalry that had just retreated from the front lines. When the soldiers saw this, they didn't care at all. This was because since last night, there had been an endless stream of defeated soldiers escaping from the front lines to Sanha City. This small group didn't look like anything special. When the soldiers saw this, they couldn't hide the disdain on their faces. In the eyes of the Mongolians, being a deserter was a very shameful act. It was not something that a warrior would do. The Mongolian army even had a rule that if any troops deserted without fighting, they would be tortured the moment they were captured. What kind of torture? It was very easy to do. The Mongolians would put these deserters into sacks and throw them into an empty space. Then they would use their cavalry to charge and trample on the sacks until none of them could move. The scene was so bloody that it was enough to make the faces of the bystanders pale. At this moment, one of the city gate guards recognized the leading general and exclaimed, "General Zhang?" The man's eyes were lifeless and his body was covered in blood. His face was dirty and covered in dry blood. The armor on his body was already broken and hung loosely on his body. If one wasn't familiar with him, they wouldn't be able to tell that this poor general was the Mongolian General Zhang Hongfan. When Zhang Hongfan heard this, he glanced at him and had a look of realization. This guard had been under his command for a period of time. No wonder he could recognize him at one glance. With this level of concern, Zhang Hongfan felt more confident. "Bring me to see the emperor. I'm here to ask for forgiveness," Zhang Hongfan said in a hoarse voice. When they heard him say this, the surrounding soldiers all looked over. Zhang Hongfan's name was not only famous in the Southern Song dynasty, it was also famous in Mongolia. In addition, he was one of the main characters in the battle last night. Naturally, he was especially eye-catching. The soldiers all looked at this poor general with curiosity, disdain, or sympathy. According to the Mongolian military rules, if the General Bayan died in battle and the Deputy General Zhang Hongfan died in battle, it would be fine. But if they didn't die and escaped alive, the problem would be even worse. Not only would Zhang Hongfan be executed, but his family might also be implicated. Therefore, in a situation like this, if the deputy general was lucky enough to survive, it was better for him to slit his own throat on the battlefield. He might even become a martyr and benefit his family. But now, Zhang Hongfan had appeared in Sanha City and wanted to see the emperor. This was very rare. As an experienced Mongolian general, Zhang Hongfan knew that if he came to Sana's city, he might not even be able to see the emperor before he was ordered to die. Of course, Zhang Hongfan wanted to die, but thinking about the current situation, he couldn't die yet. It wasn't that his loyalty to Mongolia was so high that he didn't care about his family's life. It was because deep in his heart, Zhang Hongfan still had some thoughts and calculations. The Mongolian army was defeated and Bayan died in battle. Even if Kublai was going to fight personally, he needed a general to help him. Therefore, Zhang Hongfan wanted to take a gamble and bet that Kublai wouldn't kill him now. Keeping him alive was more valuable. Also, in the battle last night, Zhang Hongfan, as the deputy general, actively organized the rescue of Bayan. He didn't fail in his duty, and he didn't run away. Kublai understood the situation and would probably let him go. Zhang Hongfan was a person who valued his life and was also an ambitious general. Therefore, last night, when he finally broke out of the encirclement under the protection of his bodyguards, he thought about it and decided to go to Sana's city. "Take me to the emperor," Zhang Hongfan said again. The guard finally reacted and said, "Please wait, I'll go inform the emperor." Perhaps the heavens really didn't want Zhang Hongfan to die. The first hurdle to see Kublai was easily passed by a familiar person at the city gate. If no one informed him, then Zhang Hongfan really wouldn't be able to escape. Not long after the guard left, he came back with an order from the emperor: immediately arrest Zhang Hongfan for his crimes and send him to the Golden Tent for trial. Hearing this, Zhang Hongfan let out a long sigh of relief. As long as the emperor was willing to see him, then there was a chance. He was afraid that the emperor wouldn't even want to see him and would just order him to be executed. What the outsiders didn't know was that in this short period of time, Zhang Hongfan's palms were covered in cold sweat. No one knew that this general had just taken a trip to the gates of hell. Zhang Hongfan took a deep breath and prepared to enter the city. From now on, he had to think about how to help the emperor fight personally. Chapter 1036. Sana's city, Khan's golden tent. Zhang Hongfan, who was tied up, finally met the Yuan Emperor Kublai. "Tell me what happened last night." Kublai had already calmed down from his rage. After all, he was a great ruler and wouldn't let his emotions affect his judgment. Otherwise, Zhang Hongfan wouldn't have been able to live until now. Zhang Hongfan relaxed. He didn't dare to hide anything and told Kublai everything that happened last night. Zhang Hongfan tried his best to not bring in any personal feelings when he told the story. Kublai knew that Zhang Hongfan wouldn't dare to play any tricks on him. That would only backfire on him. It has to be said that Zhang Hongfan really understood Kublai. After listening to Zhang Hongfan's explanation, Kublai didn't say anything and asked, "What do you plan to do next?" This was equivalent to pardoning Zhang Hongfan's death sentence and giving him a chance to redeem himself. Zhang Hongfan suppressed his excitement and said in a concise manner, "Last night's defeat was mainly a loss of morale. It wasn't a huge blow to my army. After all, we still have our main force. As long as we have a good plan and the emperor personally leads the army, Linen will definitely fall." From the looks of it, Zhang Hongfan wasn't discouraged at all and seemed very confident. "Be more specific," Kublai said. "Through these few days of fighting, I have discovered a fatal weakness of the enemy." Zhang Hongfan finally used his trump card and said slowly, "A while ago, when we arranged for the Han people to build forts, the Southern Song army didn't stop us. This shows that the Song people are weak and don't want to attack their own people." "What do you mean?" Kublai's interest was piqued. "As long as we gather another group of Han people and send them to the front lines at the gates of Lin, and we can shoot them and force them to charge at the gates. We won't have to worry about Lin and not opening the gates." Zhang Hongfan said, "Once the gates are opened, Lin will definitely fall. If there was a Han person here, they would probably want to skin Zhang Hongfan alive and eat his flesh. This person is too evil." For the sake of his own honor, Zhang Hongfan was willing to sacrifice the lives of countless Han people. How despicable. Don't forget, although Zhang Hongfan didn't live under the rule of the Southern Song dynasty, his blood was pure Chinese. Kublai, on the other hand, was very happy. Zhang Hongfan's suggestion was to his liking. He had already decided that after conquering the city of Lin, he would ignore the objections of the Han officials around him and massacre the city for 3 days. There was no one who could kill a Mongolian without paying the price in blood. Kublai ordered his men to untie Zhang Hongfan and said, "I'll leave this matter to you. Once we've conquered Linen, not only will I pardon you, but I'll also raise your rank." "Thank you, your majesty." Zhang Hongfan's face turned red. "Go and prepare. 3 days later, I will personally go to Linen." "Yes, sir." On the 18th day of the battle, in Lin, 2 days had passed since the ambush. Since yesterday, the Mongolian army that remained in the 6 bases had moved out one after another and gathered at the front lines again. After the ambush ended, there were 250,000 Mongolian soldiers gathered in the northern camp, and if the 6 bases included the soldiers who fled, there were around 45 of them. This meant that in that night's ambush, out of the 300,000 Mongolian soldiers in the eastern, western, and southern camps, only 100,000 managed to escape, and 200,000 died in battle. It was indeed a terrible defeat. In just one night, the Mongolian army had suffered double the number of casualties over the previous few days. Now, only 700,000 of the 1 million Mongolian army remained. Even so, to the Southern Song army, this was still an insurmountable mountain. Yesterday afternoon, they had already finished calculating the losses. After a series of battles, only 290,000 of the 340,000 mutants remained. Among them, 150,000 were cavalry and 140,000 were infantrymen. The 100,000 Great Song Imperial Guards were even worse off. Only 50,000 were left. Logically speaking, with 340,000 soldiers guarding Linen, it shouldn't be a problem for them to defend the city for 12 days against the 700,000 Mongolian army. After all, the Mongolian army's puppet soldiers and auxiliary troops had all been used up. Even the return cannons had suffered heavy losses. It would be very difficult for them to replicate their initial siege tactics. In a head-on siege, the Mongolian army did not have the upper hand. Because of this, after the ambush, Lin was filled with people who underestimated the enemy. Even Lord Chunshin and the others were optimistic about this battle. But for some reason, Ouyang Shua felt uneasy. After the battle, under Ouyang Shua's insistence, the Grand Council did not let down their guard. For the past 2 days, scouts have been sent out to investigate, keeping track of the Mongolian army's movements. Soon, the news of the Mongolian army capturing the Han people was reported to the Grand Council. What are they going to do? Arrange for the Han people to build more forts? Ouyang Shua was very puzzled. Without the puppet soldiers leading the charge, how would the Mongolian cavalry dare to attack the city? If that was really the case, Ouyang Shua was not afraid. With the seized rations and supplies, they could defend Lin and until the end of a month. At that time, all the problems would be solved. In the hall, Zhang Shiji and Wen Tianxiang's expressions suddenly became solemn. "I'm afraid it's not that simple." Wen Tianxiang's expression was extremely unsightly. Ouyang Shua's eyes narrowed, and he asked, "Did you think of something?" Xiongba and the others also looked over. Wen Tianxiang and Zhang Shiji looked at each other and said in a deep voice, "According to the Mongolian army's combat habits, besides using them to build forts and extract corpse oil, they also have another tactic, which is to drive the people away, forcing us to open the city gates and let the people in. Once the city gates are opened, the Mongolian army will take advantage of the situation and enter." Xiongba asked, "If that's the case, why didn't they use this tactic earlier?" No matter how he looked at it, the latter tactic was more convenient and effective than the former. Xiongba could not understand why the Mongolians gave up what was close at hand and chose to go further. Zhang Shiji rushed to reply. Generally speaking, the defending side would rather watch the people outside the city being shot to death by the Mongolians than open the city gates. Therefore, this tactic is very difficult to achieve and is not the first choice of the Mongolians. It's just that we did not attack the forts previously, so the Mongolians saw through our plan. The atmosphere in the hall became somewhat strange. From Zhang Shiji's words, It was obvious that he did not agree to be too kind to the people outside the city. When they were voting on whether to attack the forts, Zhang Shiji had voted in favor. Now that Lu Xiufu had been sacrificed, there were only 6 people left in the Grand Council. Ouyang Shuo, Guizi, and Wen Tianxiang would definitely not agree to stop the people from entering the city. Therefore, no matter how they voted, Zhang Shiji would lose. The best result would be a tie and a stalemate. Unexpectedly, Xiongba took the initiative to stand out this time. Since we have already done it, we must persevere. If the Mongolians really want to use this despicable tactic, then we can only fight them to the death in the city. Zhang Shiji looked at Xiongba in surprise, and his expression became more and more unsightly. Xiongba's statement was tantamount to completely blocking the other possibility. At the thought of the 700,000 Mongolian army attacking Lin, and Zhang Shiji felt a sharp pain in his heart. Ouyang Shuo, on the other hand, was calm. He said with a smile, "There's a way to defend the city, and there is a way not to defend the city. If we can defeat the Mongolian army once, we could defeat them twice." That's easy for you to say. How can we fight if we don't defend the city? Zhang Shiji was not so optimistic. Seeing that Zhang Shiji seemed to be deliberately making things difficult for the king, Jiasu decisively stood out and said, "General Zhang, there is no need to be discouraged. I have an idea that I can share with all of you." "Mister, please speak." Everyone present knew Jiasu's title of Poison Warrior, so they all had very high expectations of Jiasu. Jiasu said, "My king is right. There's a way not to defend the city. Since we have concluded that the enemy will use the tactic of driving the people to attack the city, then we might as well directly open a city gate and let the people in." "What should we do after opening the gate?" Zhang Shiji asked. "It's very simple. At the same time we open a city gate, we will deploy a large army outside the city gate in advance. They will act as a human wall and prevent the enemy from entering the city." Jiasu's idea was quite fresh. Zhang Shiji still had doubts. "I have calculated it. If we don't want the Mongolian army to take the opportunity to annihilate the army outside the city, we have to transfer at least 200,000 soldiers. If so, won't Lin be empty? How can we defend the city?" Ouyang Shuo's expression suddenly became solemn when he saw this. Although he did not raise his voice, there was a hint of killing intent in it. How to defend Lin is not only a matter of the army, but also not a matter of our mutant army. We have to make it clear to the millions of people in the city that once Lin is breached, the Mongolians will certainly slaughter the city. If we don't want to be lambs at the mercy of others, we have to voluntarily contribute to the war. In the end, people still have to rely on themselves to survive. Hearing this, a trace of shame flashed across Zhang Shiji's face. Yes, the people of Lin and even the entire Southern Song dynasty were too dependent on the mutant army. They had even forgotten that the mutant army was just a guest, and they were the real masters of this city. How could there be a reason for letting the guest charge at the front when the host was indifferent when it was a matter of life and death? Ouyang Shuo did not care and continued to say, "If the defending army in the city is insufficient, then we will temporarily enlist young and strong men into the army. If there are no weapons, then let them go to the battlefield outside the city to find them themselves. If there are no wood and stone to defend the city, then we will demolish the houses in the city. If there are no oil, then we will gather the vegetable oil of each household. If there are no iron or to forge arrows, then we will smash all the pots and pans at home. We must make all the people in the city realize that this is not a simple battle to defend the city, but a battle of life and death that concerns the survival of civilization. In order to win, we will risk everything and bet everything." Ouyang Shuo's impassioned speech deeply shocked everyone present. This was not some high-sounding speech, but Ouyang Shuo's heartfelt words. In history, one of the reasons for the fall of the Southern Song dynasty was that the whole nation lacked the determination to bet everything. If it was the Han and Tang dynasties, they would not be in such a sorry state. This battle had left a very deep impression on Ouyang Shuo. That was why he said these words. He firmly believed that only by mobilizing the strength of the entire city could the victory of this battle have real meaning. Otherwise, it would just be a fleeting cloud. Chapter 1037. Ouyang Shua's words excited the members of the Grand Council, and they all agreed to Jia Su's plan. After the meeting, everyone started to work. In view of Wu Qi's outstanding performance in the battle, Ouyang Shua suggested that Wu Qi be included in the Grand Council and appointed as the commander-in-chief of the Southern Song Army. After Lu Xiufu's death, Ouyang Shua became the undisputed leader of the Grand Council. At the same time, he made some adjustments to the deployment of the army. This time, the city gate open for the Han people was the North Gate, which faced the Mongolian northern camp. If there were no accidents, Kublai's golden tent would also be located in the north. In Ouyang Shua's words, he wanted to use the strongest army to fight against the strongest Mongolian army. Trump card against trump card. For this, the 150,000 cavalry of the dissimulated army was mobilized. In addition, they also deployed 50,000 infantry from the dissimulated army. In total, the 200,000 soldiers were led by Guizhi. There were only 90,000 infantrymen and 50,000 imperial soldiers left to guard Lin. The 140,000 soldiers were far from enough for the huge city of Lin. As soon as the Grand Council finished its meeting, the imperial court sent out the conscription order. It was a common practice for the Mongolian army to massacre the city. The Southern Song had just won a war and dealt a heavy blow to the Mongolian army. The people of Lin believed the imperial court's words and actively responded to the imperial court's call to participate in the upcoming war. The young men said goodbye to their parents and children and went to the conscription point in the city to enlist. Then, they left the city under the leadership of an officer and went to the battlefield to pick up weapons and equipment before the Mongolian army reached the front line. The Southern Song did not respect military force. Unlike Chong, and there were no weapons and equipment in the treasury of the capital. If they wanted to solve the problem of new recruits' equipment, they could only rely on looting. Fortunately, after the battlefield was not cleaned up. The bodies of the 200,000 Mongolian soldiers were scattered everywhere. Some of them were equipment and weapons. 2 days had passed, and the corpse that had been exposed to the sun had already become swollen, emitting a foul stench. As soon as a person walked in, they would be startled by countless flies. They were like black clouds, causing one's scalp to go numb. Because it was a battlefield, they died in different ways. It was normal to lose an arm or a leg. Some were cut in half, and their organs were exposed to the air. It was nauseating. Some had their heads smashed and brains spilled everywhere. The whole battlefield was like hell. The rookies who had just joined the army fought back their disgust and fear as they walked through the mountain of corpses and the sea of blood with difficulty. They took off the equipment from the corpses one by one, and there was a rough man who didn't care much about the equipment and put it on himself in the blink of an eye. Most of the new recruits didn't have the guts to do so, nor did they have the nerve to do so. Their faces were pale, and they vomited nonstop. In the end, there was nothing left to vomit, so they could only complain. Before joining the army, they were just ordinary people. Many of them had never even seen a dead person in their entire lives. Now that they were suddenly faced with such a bloody scene, vomiting was a normal physiological reaction. Not everyone's nerves were that thick. This was also a greeting gift for the new recruits, allowing them to truly feel the cruelty of the battlefield. Only by seeing blood would they be able to move forward in future battles to defend the city. Apart from the young men, the others also started to move. The woman contributed the vegetable oil that was very precious in her house. She usually couldn't bear to use it and gathered it together in large vats in the neighborhood before transporting it to the city wall. Under the command of the official from the Ministry of Works, the craftsmen began to demolish the idol houses and then transported the lumber and stone carts to the various sections of the city wall for storage. The temples and Taoist temples were also affected because most of these buildings were built very majestically, and they were all made of good wood, which was most suitable for defending the city. Seeing the temples being demolished, the monks and Taoist priests could only sigh silently. The world has changed. There were also some young monks and Taoist priests who simply turned around and ran to the conscription point to join the army. There was no lack of martial monks and chivalrous people among them, and they were all very capable. The major blacksmiths in the city worked day and night, forging bundles of arrows. Every moment, there were people who voluntarily sent iron pots, iron basins, and other utensils. Even the royal family moved. Not only did they completely open the palace treasury, but they also actively collected iron weapons. The 8-year-old Emperor Zhao Kuang even wanted to demolish the palace to avenge Mr. Liu, but he was stopped by the ministers. One of the ministers could not help but cry, choking and saying, "Your Majesty, no matter how difficult the imperial court is, it is not to the point of demolishing the palace. It is the symbol of the dynasty. It must not be demolished." "That's right, Your Majesty. Even if we have to demolish it, it should be the mansions of us ministers." Another minister echoed. Without the Ministry of Works officials taking action, they directly arranged for the servants to demolish the mansions. This was something unimaginable in the past. It was as if, overnight, people's views had suddenly changed, and they were completely new. The imperial court was of one mind, and they faced a national crisis together. It was proven that a nation that was forced into a desperate situation could often burst forth with power that would amaze the world. The historical Battle of Cliff Mountain, where 100,000 soldiers and civilians were willing to die for their country rather than surrender to the Yuan dynasty, was the most direct reflection of this power. Further back in history, during the reign of Duke Xiao of Qin, the people of the Qin kingdom ceded land and sought peace. The people in the country were in dire straits, and there were internal and external troubles. They were oppressed by the Wei kingdom to the point where they could no longer live. At this moment, the people of the Qin kingdom shouted, "Valiant Qin, we shall face the national crisis together." They were of one mind, and they worked hard, officially opening the curtains for the Qin kingdom to unify the world. There were many similar examples in the vast history of Huaxia in the 5,000 years of history. The city of Lin, and on the battle map, was destined to be a legend. In one night, the entire city of Lin was in motion. In the face of life and death, the people only felt that there was not enough time, and they wished that the Mongolian army would arrive later. Of course, this was wishful thinking. On the 20th day of the battle, scouts from the front line reported that Kublai had already set off from Sana's city, and he was officially leading the army. Based on the speed of the army, Kublai and his troops would arrive at the front line by tomorrow morning at the latest. Once the news came out, the entire city of Lin was instantly in a busy and uneasy mood. As the saying goes, when the forest is big, there are all kinds of birds. In the face of a national crisis, there were people who mourned, but there were also people who took advantage of the chaos to cause trouble everywhere. Everywhere in the city, there were ruffians who took advantage of the chaos to rob people, and there were even people who raped women on the streets. In addition, there were Mongolian spies hidden in the city who took advantage of the situation to spread all kinds of rumors. Lin's city was in chaos. When Ouyang Shuo received the news, he didn't hesitate at all. He immediately arranged for the divine martial guards to patrol the city. If they found people who robbed people, harassed women, or spread rumors, they were executed on the spot without any investigation. In a chaotic world, severe punishment must be used. Under Ouyang Shuo's iron fist, the divine martial guards killed a few groups of ruffians and finally stabilized the situation in the city. In the midst of the chaos, it was almost time for the final battle. On the 21st day of the battle, Lin and City. Just after midnight, Lin and City, which had just fallen into a deep sleep, quietly woke up. Squeak, Jie. In the dark night, the drawbridge of the north gate was slowly lowered, and then the city gate opened. On the streets near the city, groups of soldiers had already gathered quietly. On the two sides of the street and on the top of the city wall, torches were lit. Under Guizi's command, the troops quickly advanced in the dark with the weak light of the torches, passing through the city gate. First, it was the cavalry, then the infantry. The entire process was tense and orderly, and no chaos was caused. By the time the 200,000 troops were all in formation outside the city, it was already 7 o'clock in the morning. The sun had just risen, and light shone everywhere. In the northern suburbs outside the city, the 200,000 troops were lined up according to the 4 major formations, and the military was at its peak. The sun shone on the soldiers' armor and shoulders, and on the tip of the spears, making it dazzling. Only from a bird's-eye view could one truly see the formation of the 200,000 troops. On the left and right flanks, there were 2 fierce generals, Eli and Zhao Zhuang, each leading 50,000 elite cavalry. In the rear, there was an old general, Lin Pe, who was good at defense, personally leading 50,000 infantry. The most peculiar was the Middle Army. At the front of the Middle Army were 25,000 cavalry of Luofeng City, and in the middle were 25,000 imperial soldiers of the Xia. Behind them were the 3,000 divine martial guards, led by Su Chu. Ouyang Shuo was dressed in military attire, riding on the quasi-divine beast, Little Green, and stood impressively in the middle of the divine martial guards. This also meant that Ouyang Shuo had to personally lead the army this time. In the beginning, whether it was Feng Qiuhuang, Eli, Jia Su, or the others, none of them approved of Ouyang Shuo leading the army personally, but Ouyang Shuo had his own insistence. Ever since the founding of the Xia, as Emperor Xia, Ouyang Shuo rarely led the army personally. Even when he did, he never really fought on the battlefield. But this time was different. For some reason, ever since the start of the battle map, the murderous aura in Ouyang Shuo's body uncontrollably became active. After seeing the cruel methods of the Mongolians, his hatred turned into murderous intent, and it became even more uncontrollable. Ouyang Shuo had to release this murderous intent on the battlefield. In the past, Ouyang Shuo's blood was boiling, and he did not want his blood to turn cold after ascending to the throne. Other than personal reasons, Ouyang Shuo led the army personally to coordinate with Jia Su's battle plan. As a top tactician, Jia Su's plan was not as simple as saving the 100,000 civilians who were being held hostage by the Mongolians. That would only treat the symptoms and not the root of the problem, and it would not be enough to turn the entire battle around. To end the battle once and for all, the best way was to kill Kublai, just like how he killed Boyan. Even if it did not work, he had to severely injure Kublai and scare him away, so that he would voluntarily retreat. For this, Jia Su came up with a whole set of battle plans. The 200,000 soldiers outside the city were the core of this plan, and the entire plan needed a key person to be in charge of the final attack. No matter how one looked at it, Ouyang Shuo was the best candidate. Other than his personal combat power, Ouyang Shuo also had 2 secret weapons in his hands. Even so, Feng Qiuhuang and the others still did not agree. It was only when Ouyang Shuo showed them the substitute doll that they finally convinced Feng Qiuhuang and the others. In the army, Ouyang Shuo, who was heavily protected by the divine martial guards, looked towards the north and muttered to himself, "Kublai, let's have a pinnacle showdown between kings." The blood in Ouyang Shuo's body started to boil. Chapter 1038. At 8 a.m., Kublai arrived as scheduled. Along with Kublai was the 200,000-strong army stationed at Sana City. Kublai's golden carriage was heavily guarded by the army. It was eye-catching and majestic. Zhang Hongfan rode on a black warhorse and stood beside the carriage. In front of the army were 100,000 Han citizens. They were all skinny and their eyes were lifeless. Their clothes were tattered and they were as thin as sticks, and they were all terrified. Ever since the Mongols invaded the Song dynasty, the entire land of China was under the Mongols' iron hooves. Countless Chinese were trampled and killed, and the entire nation was going through a dark period. In history, after the Yuan dynasty conquered the Song dynasty, in order to protect the Mongol nobles, they implemented a 4-class system. The first class were Mongols, the second class were Simu, the third class were Han, and the fourth class were Southerners. The third class did not refer to the Han people, but the Han, Khitans, Jurchens who lived north of the Huai River in the Jin dynasty, as well as the people from Sichuan and Dali who were conquered later by the Mongols. The fourth class were the people of the southern Song dynasty who were conquered by the Mongols. In other words, the real Han people were the lowest class in the whole dynasty. They had to endure all kinds of unequal treatment and discrimination. They were no different from slaves. For example, Han people were prohibited from hunting, learning boxing and martial arts, holding weapons, holding gatherings to worship the gods, going to markets to do business, and walking at night. The Yuan dynasty controlled the weapons of the Han people to an unimaginable degree. Every 10 households of Han people could only use one kitchen knife, and they also had to pay a Mongol soldier to monitor them. When a girl got married, she had to give her first night to a Mongol. The Han people could not even have a name. They could only be named after their date of birth. The laws of the Yuan dynasty also stated that those who killed a Mongol had to pay with their life. Those who killed a Seamew would be fined 40 li of gold, and those who killed a Han only had to pay the price of a donkey. During wars, the difference in treatment was even greater. For example, in 1286, in order to attack Annam, the Seamew only took 2 out of 3 horses, while all the horses of the Han people were taken, no matter how many there were. Above the first class, the officials were all Mongols. When there were not enough Mongols, or when the Central Asians had enough bribes, the Central Asians would take the position. Most of the Mongolian officials are hereditary. Every Mongolian administrator, such as a governor or a county head, the prefecture or county under his jurisdiction is his fief, and the Han people are his serfs. They have no political responsibility towards the Han people, much less legal responsibility. The Mongol emperor can treat the Han people as his own farmland, along with the Han people living on the farmland, like slaves, to be bestowed to the emperor's relatives, princes, princesses, or meritorious officials. After the fall of the Southern Song dynasty, during the bestowal ceremony, a few tens or hundreds of families were rewarded, while a few hundred families were rewarded. With 5 people in each household, he could get 500,000 serfs at a time. The Mongols could even invade and occupy the farmlands at will. Often, they would suddenly drive the Han people away from the fertile farmlands, leaving the farmlands barren and overgrown with weeds for livestock. Perhaps it was because of such brutal rule that the Yuan dynasty was replaced by the Ming dynasty after 98 years. At 8:15 in the morning, Kublai's carriage was welcomed into the northern camp. After greeting the commander of the northern camp, Kublai left the carriage and went up to the command tower of the northern camp. He immediately saw the southern Song army of 200,000 soldiers outside the city. His eyes narrowed and he said, "Not bad." The southern Song army's actions were also out of Zhang Hongfan's expectations. He carefully said, "Your Majesty, should we follow the original plan to attack the city or finish off the enemy first?" "Follow the original plan." Kublai was very heroic. "Leave 400,000 soldiers in the north. The remaining 300,000 will be sent to the other 3 sides. We must take down Lin." "Yes, Your Majesty." According to the intelligence from the spies in the city, other than the 200,000 soldiers outside the city, the Southern Song army only had 140,000 soldiers inside the city. Once the city was breached, the army would enter the city, and these soldiers would not be a problem. As for the new soldiers that the Southern Song recruited, Kublai did not care about them at all. Ever since they attacked the Southern Song people were synonymous with weakness in Kublai's eyes. They were obedient and had no guts. No matter how the Mongols ordered them around, they did not dare to resist. How could these weak people produce a strong army? Although Kublai's view was a bit biased, it was also very accurate. The Southern Song dynasty had been peaceful for a long time, and the people had stayed away from war. It was an undeniable fact that the people of the Southern Song dynasty were physically weak. What Kublai did not know was that when people were in despair, they could also explode with terrifying energy. Very quickly, the Mongolian army spread out under Zhang Hongfan's command. The 100,000 Han people were also split into 3 groups and rushed towards the east, west, and west walls of Lenin. By 9 in the morning, The Mongolian army on all four sides was in position. Attack the city. Following the order, the Han people were herded forward like cattle. If they were too slow, they would be killed on the spot. The scene was extremely bloody. Agitated by this, the common people cried and screamed as they pushed and shoved toward the city gate. Strangely, the drawbridges of the three main gates of Lin had been lowered for the Han people to pass through. However, the gates were still tightly shut. No one knew why. When the Mongolian soldiers saw this, they prepared to fire a volley of arrows to force the enemy to open the gates. At that moment, a banner fell from the top of the city gate. On it was written in red, "Comrades, stick close to the wall and enter through the north gate." At the same time, the soldiers on the city walls shouted to guide the people to gather at the north gate. This confused the Mongolian soldiers, and they immediately reported it to Zhang Hongfan. Very soon, the news reached Zhang Hongfan's ears. Kublai did not personally command this attack and gave it to Zhang Hongfan. To Zhang Hongfan, this was already a great honor. When Zhang Hongfan received the report, he frowned, but he was not too surprised. He had fought with the Inhuman army a few times and knew that they were not easy to deal with. They were not given so easily. At such a crucial moment, he had to do something. Send down my order. Allow the cavalry to fire freely and force the people to charge at the city gates, Zhang Hongfan ordered. Yes, sir. With the order, the people outside the city were in trouble. The Mongolian soldiers were skilled with bows and horses, and they killed defenseless people with just one arrow. In less than 10 minutes, the people at the back of the army all fell. The blood stimulated the people's desire to live, and they all charged forward without any regard for their lives. Some of them slammed on the city gates and screamed, "Let us in, let us in!" They only wanted to avoid the threat behind them, but they did not have the time to think about what kind of disaster they would bring to the people inside once the city gates were opened and the Mongolian soldiers charged in. In front of death, everyone was selfish. There were also those who were quick-witted and ran along the base of the city wall towards the north gate with the attitude of giving a try. When the Mongolian soldiers saw this, they obviously would not let them go. They immediately turned their attention to the people who tried to escape. If they really let them go, how are they going to force the Southern Song dynasty to open the city gates? Because the people were stuck to the city walls, if the Mongolian soldiers wanted to kill them, they had to move forward. Once they moved forward, they would immediately enter the defending army's attack range. Fire! When they heard the order from the top of the city walls, the archers and crossbowmen began counterattacking together, causing the Mongolian soldiers to flee in a pathetic manner. They were forced to retreat and stand arrows throw away from the top of the city walls. Jiasu's plan was ingeniously using the structure of the city walls to create a blind spot for the people outside the city, or rather, it was a safe haven for them to escape from the Mongolian soldiers' attacks. The fierce counterattack from the defending army at the top of the city walls allowed the people who were already at the foot of the city walls to see hope for survival. All of them no longer had the time to think and just ran desperately to the north gate. When someone took the lead, there were others who followed. The situation was already very clear. The city gates would definitely not be opened, and if they stayed there, they could only wait for death. It was better for them to take a risk and run to the north gate based on the directions on the banners. In an instant, a large number of people surged to the north. The Mongolian soldiers did not know what to do, and even Zhang Hongfan found himself in a rather difficult situation. It was only then that he understood why the Southern Song dynasty had sent an army of 200,000 people to the north, and they were there to protect the 100,000 people. Because of it, half of Zhang Hongfan's plan had already failed. When he thought of the emperor's dark gaze, Zhang Hongfan could not help but shudder, and chills ran down his spine. Zhang Hongfan made up his mind and ordered the armies on the three sides to immediately attack the city. The 100,000 people he brought with him were not completely useless. At the very least, all the drawbridges in Linen City had been lowered, and the moat surrounding the city was useless. As long as they could break the city gates, they would still be able to win. While the Mongolian army was indeed mainly composed of cavalry, it did not mean that they did not have infantry. Aside from archery on horseback, the Mongolians also loved wrestling, which was commonly known as wrestling. Wrestling, horse racing, and archery were the three great Mongolian sports, and wrestling was ranked at the top. The popularity of wrestling gave birth to a group of Mongolian warriors. Right now, Zhang Hongfan wanted to bring out this trump card. He wanted to send out the most elite Mongolian warrior assault team to push the city-breaking spikes and attack the city gates. At the same time, the Mongolian army pushed out return cannons. These return cannons were brought over from the 6 bases. There was also a batch of mobile arrow towers and scaling ladders. Even though they were simple and crude, they could still be considered as siege weapons. Following Zhang Hongfan's order, the east, south, and west sides began to attack the city on a large scale. In Zhang Hongfan's opinion, the Southern Song dynasty's camp stationed 200,000 soldiers outside the city, and the city's defense must be very weak. Under the attack of 300,000 soldiers, the city would not be able to last a day. When the city of Linen was breached, the Southern Song army stationed outside the city would become a decoration. How stupid! For the sake of 100,000 worthless people, they actually wasted the combat power of 200,000 soldiers. How pedantic! Zhang Hongfan despised the Southern Song dynasty's method. For the people of Linen, the biggest test had arrived. They had to withstand the fierce attack of the Mongolian army and create an opportunity for the 200,000 soldiers outside the city to kill them. Success or failure depended on this one move. Chapter 1039. 10 o'clock in the morning. At the southern gate of Lin. In just an hour, the Mongolian warriors had been replaced 3 times. Other than being stained with blood, the southern gate was still as sturdy as ever. The hour was a complete disaster for the Mongolian warriors. Some of them were crushed into meat paste by stones. Some of them were turned into roasted pigs by boiling vegetable oil, and some of them were killed by powerful bows and crossbows. The way they died was different, but the result was the same. As time passed, there was no progress in the siege. Zhang Hongfan's face became more and more serious. His palms were sweating, but he couldn't wipe them off. Although Kublai didn't say anything, there was an invisible pressure that seemed to be crushing Zhang Hongfan. Zhang Hongfan had no choice but to grit his teeth and send wave after wave of soldiers onto the battlefield. He wanted to attack fiercely and break through the gates of Linen. The tenacity of the Southern Song army and the fierceness of their counterattack completely exceeded Zhang Hongfan's expectations. How could this be? As the first deputy general under Boyan's command, Zhang Hongfan had attacked the Southern Song army with Boyan. He had conquered at least 20 of the Southern Song army cities, but he had never encountered such tenacious resistance. Are these still the weak and easily bullied Song people I know? Standing at the top of the command tower, Zhang Hongfan couldn't believe his eyes as he looked at the fearless Southern Song recruits on the city wall. It was as if someone had cast some kind of magic on Lin and city overnight. All the people in the city became excited. They were no longer weak and dispirited. Instead, they were filled with blood and determination to fight the Mongolians. What a strange people! Zhang Hongfan muttered to himself. His face was pale. He had fewer and fewer tricks up his sleeves. Once he ran out of them, if he didn't get a good result, he would be mercilessly punished. What promotion and nobility! That was all a lie. At this moment, a messenger came from the stairs of the command tower. He was one of Kublai's guards. "General, His Majesty has ordered you to go to the Emperor." Hearing this, Zhang Hongfan's legs softened and he almost fell. He wondered if His Majesty was completely disappointed in him and was prepared to execute him on the spot as a sacrifice to the military flag. Fear washed over Zhang Hongfan like a tidal wave. For a moment, Zhang Hongfan even thought of jumping down from the command tower and ending his life. "General," seeing Zhang Hongfan's gloomy expression, the messenger reminded him. "Oh, okay, I'll go now." Zhang Hongfan suddenly came to his senses. He felt ashamed of his thoughts just now. How could it be like this? He was a great general. How could he be so timid? Even if he was going to die, he wanted to die honorably. In the end, it was the recent setbacks that had greatly impacted Zhang Hongfan's confidence. Under the guidance of a messenger, Zhang Hongfan quickly met with Kublai. Kublai sat on his throne. His expression was no longer as relaxed as it was at the start, but it wasn't very serious either. As a ruler of a generation, Kublai had seen all sorts of storms. Minister Zhang, I want to know how much longer it will take down Lin in. Because he was surrounded by Han officials, Kublai was very familiar with the Han Emperor's methods. Zhang Hongfan opened his mouth wide, but he couldn't say a single word. Of course, he wanted to pat his chest and say that he would definitely be able to take down Lin within half a day, but he didn't dare to. Seeing this, Kublai said plainly, Minister Zhang, I am very disappointed. Hearing this, Zhang Hongfan almost reflexively knelt down and kowtowed. I have failed His Majesty's trust and deserve to die. I am willing to accept my punishment. As he spoke, he kowtowed again and again until his forehead broke. Kublai looked at the performance of his beloved general and didn't say anything. After a while, he said, Get up. We can talk about your punishment after the battle. I will give you another 100,000 soldiers. If you still can't take down Lin, bring your head to me. Zhang Hongfan was indeed clear-headed. He didn't immediately agree. Instead, he once again expressed his loyalty to Kublai and worriedly said, I don't dare. Why not? Are you afraid of the Southern Song? Suddenly, a sharp killing intent rose from Kublai's body. He was like a wolf on the plains, ready to tear his enemies into pieces at any moment. Kublai couldn't tolerate a cowardly general. I'm not afraid. I'm just worried about His Majesty's safety. The enemy has stationed 200,000 soldiers in the north. If we send another 100,000 soldiers, I'm worried that the Southern Song will attack first. Zhang Hongfan explained. Kublai's expression softened and his killing intent disappeared. He said, You don't need to worry about that. I have 300,000 soldiers to protect me. Even if the Southern Song dares to attack first, they won't be able to return. Even though he hadn't personally seen the power of the mutants, Kublai was still very confident in the Mongolian cavalry under his command. This army had fought with him all over the world and had never lost a battle. Kublai still didn't believe that there was something stronger than his army in this world. In order to shirk the blame for the crushing defeat in the previous ambush, the losers would naturally exaggerate to the enemy. He believed this without a doubt. There was an old saying that experience could help, but it could also kill. Kublai was currently making the mistake of empiricism. He was using his past battle experience to estimate the enemy. He didn't know that there was an even bigger world outside of the battle map. Although Zhang Hongfan didn't agree, he didn't argue anymore. These 100,000 reinforcements were his last hope. He had to hold on to them to save his own fate. Just like that, the matter was decided. Soon, 100,000 Mongolian soldiers left the northern barracks and moved towards the east and west. Lin and City, North City Tower. As the commander of the 200,000 soldiers, Guizi didn't appear on the battlefield. Instead, he stayed at the North City Tower. He looked down from above and observed the enemy's every move, preparing to attack at any moment. In order to face off against the Southern Song army, the Mongolian army also walked out of the northern barracks and formed a formation in front of the camp. The Mongolian army was formed in units of 10,000 soldiers. There were 40 cavalry formations, which made people's scalps go numb. Such a shocking battle scene could only appear in a game. Kublai's imperial entourage also appeared on the battlefield, but it was at the back of the army. The 40 cavalry formations were arranged in 4 rows and 10 rows. Kublai's personal guards were in the 4th and 5th rows. Just at this moment, 10,000 strong soldiers from each side of the formation moved towards the flanks. They were the 100,000 soldiers who were sent by Kublai to reinforce the flanks. Even so, the end of the cavalry formation couldn't be seen. No wonder Kublai was so confident. Guizi also smiled. You finally moved. I was just worried that you wouldn't move. Before the battle started, the Grand Council had made a detailed evaluation of Jiasu's plan. With the strength of 150,000 cavalry, they could at most fight against 350,000 Mongolian cavalry. Anything more than that would be too much for them, so they could only give up on the plan to kill the leader. Because of this, Wu Qi, who was commanding the defense of the city, had to mobilize all of the defensive forces and display their strength to attract the enemy to reinforce the front lines. As expected, Kublai fell for it and immediately mobilized 100,000 soldiers. Because of this, the situation was very good for the Southern Song Army. When the 100,000 Mongolian cavalry gradually left, Guizi started to move. "Send my order. All troops get ready." She waved the flag at the top of the city wall, and the troops at the foot of the city immediately received the signal. The order was like a wave, and it was quickly and accurately sent down layer by layer until it reached each cavalier. Once they received the order, all the cavaliers felt their spirits lift. They used the shortest amount of time possible to check their equipment and make sure that they were in the best condition for battle. A huge battle was about to break out at any moment. Attack! Guizi was very decisive. She did not hesitate at all. Boom, 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 boom. The war drums beat, and the flag fluttered. At the left was the fierce General Eli, who had made great contributions during the ambush and killed Boyan. He suddenly opened his eyes, and Rakshasa under him became alert as well. "Boys, charge with me." Eli did not say anything else. He tapped the ground lightly on Rakshasa, and like an arrow, he took the lead to charge at the Mongolian army. The 50,000 elite cavaliers moved like a single entity, and for a period of time, smoke and dust rose into the air. Strangely, the cavaliers at the left did not charge in the usual straight line. Instead, they followed Eli's path and moved diagonally from the left to the center. At the same time, Zhao Zhuang's troops on the right also moved out. Just like the left, the right also moved diagonally from the right to the center. If there were no surprises, the two armies would converge at the center of the enemy army. During this process, the 50,000 elite cavaliers in the center did not move at all, as if they had no intention of charging. A strange charge. The strange behavior of the mutants was quickly noticed by the Mongolian army. When Kublai received the news, he stood up from his seat and grinned. They really dared to come. "All right, let's have a good fight." Although he was the emperor of the Yuan dynasty, Kublai still had the blood of the Gold family flowing in his veins. He was a warrior and a general who had killed countless enemies. Kublai was not afraid of the battlefield at all. On the contrary, the provocation of the mutants aroused Kublai's desire for battle. He could no longer control the boiling blood in his body, and he decided to fight. Walla! Walla! The people around Kublai were all elite Mongolian cavaliers, so they were naturally fearless. Once the order was given, they all turned into wolves and wanted to devour the enemy. Almost at the same time, the Mongolian cavaliers moved. First, the first row, then the second, third, and fourth row. It was as if they were going to topple the mountains and overturn the seas. Throughout the entire process, only the 5 formations around Kublai did not move. They loyally guarded the area, acting as the last line of defense for the emperor. The wind was howling, the horses were neighing, and the earth was roaring. At around 11 a.m., a sudden clash of cavaliers occurred in the northern suburbs of Linen City. Because there were too many cavaliers facing off against each other, the charging cavaliers stirred up a cloud of dust that almost covered the entire battlefield. Amidst the cloud of dust, the center of the mutants' army began to move. Chapter 1040. The cavalry on the left and right flanks of the Inhuman army moved to the center and formed a wedge-shaped formation. Just when the two armies were about to meet at the center of the battlefield, they suddenly took a huge turn and moved diagonally from the center to the sides, forming an X shape that did not meet at the center. The X shape was the second and fifth rows of the Mongolian army, and Kublai's carriage was in the 2 square formations behind the X shape. The strength of the Inhuman army was fully displayed in this charge. Since they took the initiative to attack, the 2 flanks were like 2 steel torrents formed by countless bulldozers. Wherever they went, the enemy forces were all flattened. They really flattened everything. Wherever the high-speed charging army pointed, the Mongolian cavalry would either be pushed to the sides or trampled in a meat paste by the army. Even if there were some lucky cavalrymen who brushed past the army, they would not be killed by the cavalry behind them. Their corpses would fall off their horses and be trampled into the ground by the army. Blood splattered on the green grass and dyed the yellow soil under their feet red. If anyone looked down from the sky, they would see that the originally magnificent Mongolian cavalry formation had a huge bloody X shape carved into it under the charge of the inhuman army from the left and right flanks. It was an indescribably shocking sight. At this moment, the Central Army, which had been waiting for action, finally moved. Fallen Phoenix City's cavalry took the lead, Great Xia's Forbidden Guards were in the middle, and the Divine Martial Guards were at the back. They formed an arrowhead that charged straight into the X shape. Since the two flanks split most of the pressure, the center army only needed to destroy the first and fifth row of 10,000 soldiers in front of them, and they would be able to advance smoothly. At that moment, the Mongolian cavalry had already reacted. Under Kublai's personal command, they charged forward. The two armies crashed into each other, and it looked like they were going to die together. The sound of horse hooves charging against each other caused the ground to tremble. The soldiers from both sides gripped their weapons tightly and gripped their reins tightly. They clamped their legs against the backs of their horses and stared ahead. Even their breathing became rapid. Very soon, the two armies intersected with each other. There were people in each other, and there were people in each other. For a moment, people were thrown off their horses, and blood could be seen everywhere. The cavalry of both sides crossed each other, their cloaks fluttering in the wind. They either brandished their spears or waved their scimitars, fiercely slashing at the enemy, looking as if they wanted to kill the other party. Just like that, Fallen Phoenix City's cavalry whizzed past without stopping. After defeating the first group of 10,000 men, they continued to attack the second and fifth rows, which were also the intersection point of the left and right wings. The Imperial Guards of the Great Xia dynasty cleaned up the remnants of the previous 10,000-strong team as if they were chopping vegetables. It was only now that Kublai was shocked. He now believed that what Zhang Hongfan and the others said was true. There really are cavalry troops in this world that are stronger than the Mongolian cavalry. Kublai felt a trace of regret. He regretted sending away the 100,000 soldiers, but it was too late. The two armies were entangled with each other, and it wasn't as if they wanted to retreat. They could only brace themselves and continue advancing. When a middle army passed through the intersection point of the X formation, the Fallen Phoenix City cavalry at the front suddenly split into two and formed a small V shape along the inner circle of the two flanks. The Fallen Phoenix City cavalry had completed their mission. Next, they would assist the two flanks and lock down the two sides of the Mongolian army so that they couldn't send reinforcements to the center. The Great Xia Dynasty Imperial Guards, who were acting as the arrowheads, were even more ferocious. They headed straight for the third and fifth rows, which was also the last line of defense for Kublai. The inhuman cavalry's coordination with each other was smooth and pleasing to the eye. Only the most elite cavalry of the wilderness could complete such a difficult tactic in a battlefield full of variables. At this point, Kublai finally saw the enemy's intentions. Damn it, you want to kill me? Dream on. Without needing Kublai's command, the four 10,000-strong teams immediately moved closer to the center, trying to block the Great Xia Dynasty Imperial Guard's charge. The most beautiful shockwaves exploded in the center of the battlefield. Although the Great Xia Dynasty Imperial Guards were unparalleled, the four 10,000-strong teams around Kublai were also the most elite Mongolian cavalry troops, and they were all heavily armored cavalry. It was hard to tell who was stronger, and they started a fight. At this point, the entire battlefield seemed to have entered a stalemate. The 150,000-strong inhuman cavalry relied on an intricately designed wedge-shaped formation. Like a wedge, they stabbed right into the 300,000 Mongolian army in an attempt to kill their leader. However, the Mongolian cavalry weren't pushovers. Although they were caught off guard, they still had the advantage in numbers. Under Kublai's command, they quickly stabilized themselves. The Mongolian cavalry at the periphery had already reacted. They gave up on charging head-on and started a charge at the X line that the inhuman army was trying to maintain. Looking at the situation, Kublai actually wanted to use the troops at the periphery to surround the inhuman army. What was worse was that when the Mongolian army learned that the northern barracks had been attacked, the East and West Mongolian army started to move north. In Zhang Hongfan's eyes, nothing was more important than saving the emperor. Thus, when he received the news, Zhang Hongfan immediately stopped attacking the city and led his troops north as reinforcements. However, the garrison of Linen City didn't dare to attack. Letting these newbies, who weren't even new recruits, guard the city walls was already the limit of what they could do. If they really charged out, they would only end up as food for the enemy. The situation was starting to look bad for the Southern Song army. The strange thing was, regardless of whether it was the inhuman cavaliers who were still charging or Guizi, who was commanding at the top of the city walls, none of them showed any panic. They seemed to be very confident. The source of this was the Divine Guards that Ouyang Shua personally led. This rare special force had been following behind the main army since the start of the war and hadn't shown its fangs yet. While the Great Xia Imperial Guards held back the enemy, the Divine Guards finally exploded. Under Ouyang Shua's personal lead, they were like a sharp arrow that tore through the air and headed straight for Kublai's square formation. Ouyang Shua was very confident in fighting 3,000 against 10,000. After they practiced the War Soldier Codex and used it with the 10,000-year-old stalactite, the strength of the 3,000 Divine Guards had increased to another level. One Divine Guard could fight against 3 Great Xia Imperial Guards. When they grouped together, they were even more terrifying. They could practically kill anyone who stood in their way. The key was time. The Divine Guards had to kill Kublai before the Mongolian reinforcements arrived. This is too difficult. Kublai wasn't a block of wood. He wouldn't just stand there and wait for Ouyang Shua to kill him. Just as the Divine Guards fiercely charged into the 4th and 5th rows, Kublai suddenly did something unexpected. He actually abandoned the main army and retreated back to the campsite under the protection of his personal guards. Kublai ran away. This didn't mean that Kublai was a coward. It was just that this emperor had already seen the situation clearly and knew that as long as they maintained this stalemate, the Mongolian army would definitely win. However, the prerequisite was that Kublai couldn't stay on the battlefield and distract the Mongolian army. While retreating, Kublai even felt a bit proud. The inhuman army's seemingly meticulous plan was actually digging a huge hole for themselves. They were practically asking for their own deaths. Kublai's mood suddenly became very good. On the battlefield, Ouyang Shua swept the Sky Demon Spear in his hand forward. A black light flashed and instantly killed 4 to 5 Mongolian cavaliers. Seeing that Kublai was about to escape, Ouyang Shua smiled coldly. In the end, I still have to use my trump card. Ouyang Shua quickly took out a card from his chest pocket. River East Warrior Summon Card. Purple gold one-time consumable. After using, the user can summon 10,000 River East Warriors to assist them in battle. Lasts for 12 hours. Summon. Ouyang Shua didn't hesitate and immediately used it. As long as he could kill Kublai, using a purple gold grade item was completely worth it. Ouyang Shua didn't believe that Kublai wouldn't drop any treasures after he died. With Ouyang Shua at the center, a large ball of white light suddenly rose up, blinding everyone's eyes. This white light was extremely domineering, and it spread out at a visible speed. There seemed to be a mysterious power within the white light that could distinguish between friend and foe. It pushed away the Mongolian cavaliers who were still fighting with the Divine Guards until an empty space that could hold 10,000 people appeared. When the white light disappeared, 10,000 River East warriors appeared on the battlefield. The leader was a middle-aged general in silver armor. He cupped his fists and said to Ouyang Shua, "General Xiang Bing, 10,000 River East warriors are in position. Please give the order. Kill them." Ouyang Shua pointed at the Mongolian cavaliers and said, "Yes, sir." Xiang Bing didn't say anything else. He led his troops and charged towards the Mongolian cavaliers. Ouyang Shual led the divine guards forward and chased after Kublai all the way into the northern barracks. The sudden change made all the generals and soldiers at the scene dumbfounded, especially the Mongolian army. They couldn't understand what was going on even in their dreams. Zhang Hongfan, who was still on his way to help, looked at the flashing white light from afar. His heart trembled. He suddenly remembered a rumor in Lin and City. It was said that Emperor Xia was an immortal who descended to the mortal world and could summon heavenly soldiers and generals. Didn't the scene in front of him prove this ridiculous rumor? Are we fighting against an immortal? Just thinking about it made Zhang Hongfan feel incredulous. Fear rose in his heart. At this moment, on the northern wall of Lin and City, the new soldiers who were in charge of guarding this place were already kneeling on the ground. They faced the north and worshipped. They murmured, "The immortal has shown himself. The immortal has shown himself." The commoners who just entered the northern gate were also dumbfounded. It was as if time had stopped. The entire battlefield was silent. It wasn't until the River East warriors led by Xiang Bing arrived that the Mongolian cavaliers regained their senses and instinctively fought back. Kill! This shout was like the key to time. It brought the warriors back to the mortal world. Suddenly, the sound of killing could be heard everywhere. The Battle of Cliff Mountain had entered its most crucial period, the northern barracks. Although the battle had begun, this place was not empty. Zhang Hongfan had arranged for a group of Mongolian warriors to guard this place. Therefore, when Ouyang Shual and his troops entered the barracks, they were greeted by a wave of arrows. Ouyang Shual looked at Kublai's silhouette and sneered, "What, you want to play hide and seek?" Chapter 1042. Ouyang Shual noticed that although Xiongba and the others had gained a lot from this battle and earned a lot of contribution points, other than Di Chun, the others did not look too excited. It was quite strange. Xiongba and the others took the opportunity to use the contribution points to exchange for items in the battle market instead of directly converting them into contribution points. It seemed that they no longer cared about personal titles. Ouyang Shual saw this and was deep in thought. After the exchange, the dead troops were revived. Di Chun and the others led the troops to teleport away, leaving Ouyang Shual alone to receive the final reward. Ouyang Shual did not have to wait too long. The reward was sent by Zhang Shiji and Wen Tianxiang. Ouyang Shual took a look and saw that it was 2 talismans. Resurrection Talisman, Lu Xiufu. This is a specific resurrection talisman. It was condensed by the people of Lin and in remembrance of Lu Xiufu's death. After using it, it could be used to recruit Lu Xiufu. Ouyang Shual came to a sudden understanding. He was still thinking earlier why the rewards this time would break the conventions of the past and change from 1 prize to 2. So it turns out that this is the reason. This talisman should be an extra reward given to Ouyang Shual by Gaia. Summoning Talisman Song. This is a specific summoning talisman. It can be used to summon a pair of civil and military officials. Ouyang Shual smiled. The North and South Song dynasties were full of talents. There was no lack of famous people in history. The Song dynasty was governed by civil officials. There were countless famous officials. Ouyang Shual had an impression of Wang Engshi, Zhao Pu, Ouyang Xiu, Sima Guang, Fu Bai, Han Qi, and Li Gang. As for the military officials, there were Yu Fei, Han Shizhong, Yang Zixing, Xian Qiji, and Liang Hongyu. Like Ko Zhuan, Bao Zheng, Fan Zhongyin, and Di Qing, the civil and military officials were already serving in the Xia dynasty. It was really difficult to choose a pair of civil and military officials in the Song dynasty. This was, of course, a happy worry. Ouyang Shual put the 2 talismans into his storage pouch. Just as he was about to leave, Zhang Shiji and Wen Tianxiang knelt on one knee and said, "We are willing to follow Emperor Xia. Please grant us our wish." As 2 of the 3 heroes of the late Song dynasty, the 2 were deeply impressed by Ouyang Shual's charisma and the emperor's magnanimity during the battle. Ouyang Shual was overjoyed, and he smiled as he helped the 2 of them up. This prince is extremely happy that the 2 generals are willing to serve in Great Xia. Quickly get up. Although Zhang Shiji and Wen Tianxiang couldn't be considered first-rate generals, they were still king-level historical geniuses. The more Ouyang Shuo learned, the better. Ouyang Shuo stopped for a moment when he saw this, and he utilized the resurrection talisman he'd just obtained to revive Lu Xiufu. As a result, the three heroes of the Song dynasty gathered again, but with a different master. Name, Lu Xiufu, king level, title, one of the three heroes of the late Song dynasty. Song dynasty identity. Great Xia civil official, occupation, civil official loyalty, 78 points commander, 50 martial power, 40 intelligence, 75 politics, 78 specialty. Loyal minister, increases the dynasty's integrity by 35, increases the dynasty's efficiency by 30. Evaluation. Xiufu is talented and beautiful. Few scholars can compare to her. She had a quiet personality and did not seek to be known by others. Name, Wen Tianxiang, king level, title. One of the three heroes of the late Song dynasty. Song dynasty identity. Great Xia civil official, occupation, civil official loyalty, 78 points commander, 70 martial power, 45 intelligence, 72 politics, 70 specialty, loyal, increases the dynasty's integrity by 40, increases the dynasty's efficiency by 20, increases the dynasty's level of humanities by 15. Evaluation. Loyal to the heavens and earth, loyal to the sun and the moon. Name, Zhang Shiji, king level, title, one of the three heroes of the Song dynasty. Song dynasty identity. Great Xia general, occupation, special class general loyalty, 78 points commander, 75 martial power, 70 intelligence, 65 politics, 68 specialty. Righteous general, increases the army's attack power by 20, increases the army's movement speed by 15. Evaluation. The reconstruction of the people really depended on the strength of the heroes. However, he had no ambition. He had a large army and only wanted to escape. It was a pity that he lost the Battle of Mount Shao. With the three heroes of the Song dynasty and 150,000 merit points, Ouyang Shuo didn't stay any longer and teleported away from the map. As soon as he returned to Shanghai City, he heard a series of system announcements. System announcement. The Battle of Cliff Mountain has officially ended. The main historical figures of the Song dynasty have automatically joined the game. Please explore on your own. The Song dynasty occupied an important position in Huaxia's 5,000 years of history. Apart from the civil and military officials mentioned earlier, there were also a large number of great talents in other fields who shone in the annals of history. For example, famous doctors like Song Xiai and Qian, literary giants like Su Shi, Cai Gong, Yin Shu, Lu Yu, Yang Wanli, and Li Qingzhao, thinkers like Zhu Xi, Zhou Dunyi, Zhang Zai, and Shen Tuan, inventors like Bai Sheng and Shun Kuo, and even the famous courtesan Li Shi and the founder of the Chuanjin sect, Wang Chongyang. Without a doubt, the addition of the historical figures of the Song dynasty would greatly enrich the talent pool in the wilderness. System announcement. The Battle of Cliff Mountain has officially ended. The main historical figures of the Yuan dynasty have automatically joined the game. Please explore on your own. In the end, Gaia skipped the Yuan dynasty and directly joined the game. Compared to the Song dynasty, the historical figures of the Yuan dynasty seemed a little lacking, especially in terms of civil officials and generals. There were few great talents that could be remembered by history. However, in the field of humanities, there were famous people like the four great families of the Yuan dynasty, Ma Ziyuan, Guan Hanqing, Bai Pu, and Zheng Guangzhu, who left their mark in the long river of history. After that, there were only the Ming and Qing dynasties left. System announcement. The Battle of Cliff Mountain has officially ended. The Wushan sect and other martial arts sects have automatically joined the game. Please explore on your own. By the beginning of the Song dynasty, the whole of Jianghu had become quite lively. Apart from Wang Chongyang of the Chuanjin sect, the martial arts sects of the Song and Yuan dynasties had sprung up like bamboo shoots after a spring rain. The whole of Jianghu had gradually become complete. System announcement. The Battle of Cliff Mountain has officially ended. The founder of the Song dynasty, Zhao Kuangyin, has entered Xianyang. The Xianyang court has automatically been replaced by the Song dynasty. Zhao Pu, Murong Yin Zhao, Gao Huaid, Wang Xinqi, Han Lingquan, Shi Shouxin, Zhang Lingduo, Zhang Guanghan, Zhao Yanwei, and other famous officials and generals have automatically joined the Song dynasty. Emperor Qin and Emperor Han Wu, the founder of the Tang sect. The founder of the Song dynasty, Zhao Kuangyin's literary and martial arts skills did not need to be mentioned. They were very dazzling. However, the civil officials and generals under him were not that famous. After he gave up his military power, most of them were lost in the long river of history. Zhao Kuangyin entering Xianyang was not good news for Danyang City, which was entrenched in the Jiangsu province. The future depended on how Lord Chunxin or the Yan-Huang alliance handled the relationship between the two. System announcement. The Battle of Cliff Mountain has officially ended. Genghis Khan, Temujin, has entered Hala and Lin. The Mongolian tribes have automatically been replaced by the Great Mongolian Empire. Yelu Chukai, Borchu, Mawali, Chilawin, Borchu, Jeeb, Ogdi, and Thor, and other famous officials and generals have automatically joined the Great Mongolian Empire. Compared to the civil officials and generals under Emperor Taizu, the civil officials and generals under Genghis Khan could be said to be luxurious. Other than Yelu Chukai, who was one of the 10 famous ministers along with Xiao He and Wang Ongshi, Genghis Khan had 5 other fours under his command. They were the 4 heroes, Borchu, Mawali, Qi Laowin, and Borchu. For heroes, Jeeb, Zelim, Subutai, and Hubali. For brothers, Hazer, Belgatai, Hechuan, and Temuj. For sons, Joki, Shagatai, Ogdi, and Thor. For adopted sons, Kwakwachu, Shurji Kudahu, Borchu, and Chuchu. Each of these 20 people could be considered a great general, and some of them were even first-rate generals. The Great Mongolian Empire had relied on this group of people to conquer hundreds of battles in the south and conquer a vast territory. It could be foreseen that as this group of people followed Genghis Khan and appeared in the Great Mongolian Empire, it would set off a storm in the Mongolian grasslands or even the entire wilderness. It was not without reason that Ouyang Shua had always been wary of the Mongolian tribes. System announcement. The Battle of Cliff Mountain has officially ended. Dali Zhongzong Duan Zhengchen has entered Dali. The Dali Imperial Court has automatically been replaced by the Dali Empire. Duan Yu and other famous officials and generals have automatically joined the Dali Empire. Among the 9 great king cities, the Dali Imperial Court was probably the weakest. It did not even have any decent civil officials or generals. Even so, with the emperor residing in the imperial court, the Dali Imperial Court would change and become a force that could not be ignored in the wilderness. Not to mention anything else, just the 1 million imperial guards was enough to explain everything. Fortunately, Ouyang Shua was already mentally prepared for this. Dali Prefecture had long been sealed off by the Great Xia Empire, and the territory within the prefecture had been destroyed by the Great Xia Empire. It had returned to its original state of wilderness. The first problem in front of the Dali Emperor, Duan Zhengchen, was how to feed the millions of soldiers and civilians in Dali after Gaia removed the preferential treatment. Of course, Ouyang Shua did not forget that there was still a player lurking in the Dali Imperial Palace. Naturally, Ouyang Shua did not plan to let this player who had once attacked the Breeze Pavilion go. In the future, there would probably be an unexplainable grudge between the Great Xia Empire and Dali Empire. System announcement. The Battle of Cliff Mountain has officially ended. Xixia Jingzong Li Yuanhao has entered Xingqing City. The Xixia forces have automatically been replaced by the Xixia Empire. Yili Wangrong, Yili Yuqi, and other famous officials and generals have automatically joined the Xixia Empire. System announcement. The Battle of Cliff Mountain has officially ended. The great ancestor of the Jin Empire, Wanyan Agu, has entered the Ning Mansion. The Jurchen forces have automatically been replaced by the Jin Empire. Wanyan Sagai, Wanyan Zonghan, Wang Yanxin, and other famous officials and generals have automatically joined the Jin Empire. Wang Egu, the great ancestor of the Jin Empire, was the chief of the Jurchen slave owners. He had completed the two major events of establishing a nation and conquering the Liao Empire. Thus, a new era had begun in the history of the Jurchen race. What was even more incredible was that 400 years after the fall of the Jin Empire, in 1615 AD, the leader of the Jurchen people in Jianzhou, Nurhaci, established a nation in Hechuala City. The nation was called the Great Jin and was known as the later Jin in history. In 1635 AD, Huang Taiji changed the name to the Manchus. In 1644, the Qing dynasty established by the Manchus entered the Central Plains and became the second dynasty in the history of China. The Great Song Dynasty, the Great Mongolia Empire, the Dali Empire, the Xixia Empire, and the Jin Empire had just finished the Battle of Cliff Mountain, and 5 major forces had already entered the wilderness. Their momentum was fierce, and the impact on the players in the China region could be imagined. Except for the 2 royal cities, Jianya and the capital, the entire wilderness had already entered the game. Without a doubt, an even more magnificent historical picture had been quietly unveiled. Coincidentally, in the entire map of the wilderness, the territory of the Great Xia Empire coincided with that of the Southern Song Dynasty. In such a heroic wave of history, how would Ouyang Shao and the Great Xia Empire ride the waves and avoid the tragic end of the Southern Song Dynasty? Everything will be tested by time. Chapter 1043. A series of system announcements filled the wilderness with noise and excitement. This was not the end. System announcement. The Battle of Cliff Mountain has officially ended. 36 Liangshan heroes from the Song Dynasty have joined the game. Please explore on your own. In water margin, there were a total of 108 Liangshan heroes. Only 36 of them actually existed. The remaining 72 were added by the author, Serene, for the sake of the novel's plot. These 36 people were Song Jiang, Chao Gai, Wu Yong, Lu Junyi, Guan Sheng, Shi Jin, Chai Jin, Wan Xiao Er, Wan Xiao Wu, Wan Xiao Qi, Lu Tang, Zhang Qing, Yin Qing, Sun Li Zhang Shun, Zhang Heng, Hu Yinzhua, Li Jun, Hua Rong, Qin Ming, Li Kuei, Lei Heng, Dai Zong, Suo Chao, Yang Ji, Yang Xiong, Dong Ping, Jie Zhen, Jie Bao, Zhu Tong, Mu Heng, Shi Xiu, Su Ning, Li Ying, Flower Monk, and Wu Song. Even so, the appearance of the 36 Liangshan heroes in the wilderness would probably cause a stir. This was because none of them were people who would let others off easy. If not, Gaia would not have issued a system announcement. It was unknown how many of them would take the initiative to join Great Xia. The system announcements did not stop. The last one was related to Ouyang Shao. System announcement. Congratulations to player not have closed for gathering the 3 heroes of the late Song Dynasty, Lu Xiufu, Zhang Shiji, and Wen Tianxiang. You will be rewarded with a King Summoning Talisman and 100,000 reputation points. Di Chun and the others almost vomited blood when they heard the announcement. How can this be? How can all the benefits be taken by the old fox? Di Chun felt wronged. Yin Huang Alliance had put in a lot of effort in the battle map. Why was Ouyang Shao the only one who benefited in the end? It was simply too unfair. Di Chun and the others could only blame themselves for not having Ouyang Shao's charisma. Ouyang Shao was secretly pleased. Not only did the Battle of Cliff Mountain give him 150,000 merit points, but he also recruited 6 historical talents at once. It was a great harvest. After making arrangements for Lu Xiufu and the others, Ouyang Shao returned to the Imperial Study and took out 2 summoning amulets. Ouyang Shao tore open the King's summoning amulet that was rewarded by Gaia. A white light flashed, and a peerless beauty appeared. Your servant, Li Shi, greets your majesty. Ouyang Shao was obviously startled. He didn't expect that he would summon such a special person. It was said that Li Shi was deeply loved by Emperor Huizong of the Song Dynasty and was favored by the famous poet Zhou Bangyan of the Song Dynasty. It was also said that she had an affair with Yin Qing, one of the heroes of Liangshan. From this, it could be seen that her story was rather legendary, and it also indirectly proved that Li Shirshi's beauty and talent were unparalleled. Although he had seen Jiao Chan and Wang Zhaojun, the four great beauties, Ouyang Shuo was still stunned when he saw Li Shirshi. This beauty was different from Wang Zhaojun and the others. There were also brothels in Shanghai City, but Ouyang Shuo had no intention of sending Li Shirshi there. Compared to a brothel, there was another place that was more suitable for a famous and beautiful woman like Li Shirshi. This place was none other than Shanghai Entertainment Holdings Group. Currently, the group already had Wang Zhaojun and Jiao Chan, who were super popular celebrities. With Li Shirshi joining them, she would definitely shine brightly and charm thousands of men. Of course, it would also bring huge profits to Shanghai Entertainment Holdings Group. After asking Qingyi, a scholar of the Secret Literature Pavilion, to bring Li Shirshi away, Ouyang Shuo began to use the second summoning talisman. System notification. It has been detected that the player not wearing anything is using a specific summoning talisman. Please specify the person's name. Summoning talisman, Song, could summon a pair of civil and military officials of the Song dynasty, and there was no level limit. Naturally, the higher the level, the better. The Southern Song dynasty had the so-called four resurgent generals, which were Yu Fei, Han Shizhong, Zhang Jun, and Lu Guangshi. Among the four, other than Yu Fei and Han Shizhong, the other two were somewhat unworthy of the name. Between Yu Fei and Han Shizhong, Ouyang Shuo still chose Yu Fei, who was more famous. Besides, if Yu Fei came, his son Yu Yun would probably immediately come and join him. It was worth it. As for the civil officials, Wang Engshi was one of the top 10 famous ministers in history, so he was definitely a godly talent. However, Ouyang Shuo did not like this person. This idealistic reformist was not suitable for the current Great Xia dynasty. Summoning Wang Engshi would only cause trouble. History had already proven that Wang Engshi's reform was a complete failure. Not only did it fail to save the Northern Song dynasty from collapse, but it also further dragged the Song dynasty into the quagmire of clique disputes. After thinking about it, Ouyang Shuo still decided to summon Ouyang Xiao. It was not because Ouyang Xiao had great achievements in the court, but because of Ouyang Xiao's influence. Ouyang Xiao was the leader of the literary world who first created a literary style in the history of the Song dynasty. He led the Northern Song dynasty's poetry reform movement and inherited and developed Han Yu's theory of ancient literature. With Ouyang Xiao, the leader of the literary world, there was no need for Great Xia to worry about not being able to attract other literati. In addition, Ouyang Xiao was full of praises for the younger generation with real talent and did his best to recommend them. This caused a large number of young talents who were unknown at that time to stand out and become famous in the future. They were known as the Bo Lu of the ages. Not only did they include Su Shi, Su Zhe, Zheng Gong, and other literary giants, but also Zhang Zai, Cheng Hao, and Lv Dajuan. Ouyang Xiao had students all over the world. Bao Zheng, Han Qi, Wen Yanbo, and Sima Guang were all praised and recommended by him. 5 of the 8 great families of Tang and Song in the Song dynasty were all under his tutelage. Moreover, they were all ordinary people who were picked by him and brought under his tutelage. Therefore, summoning Ouyang Xiao was definitely a good deal. Choose Ouyang Xiao and Yu Fei. System notification. The specified characters have met the requirements. Beginning summoning. A white light flashed, and Ouyang Xiao and Yu Fei appeared. They bowed and said, "Greetings, Your Majesty." Ouyang Xiao smiled and helped the two of them up. It was said that scholars were romantic, but Ouyang Xiao's appearance was very different from his fresh and elegant words. Although Ouyang Xiao was the leader of the literary world, he wasn't handsome. Not only was he not handsome, he was also a little ugly. Not only was he very nearsighted, but he also had 2 exposed rabbit teeth. He was short and skinny. Ouyang Xiao naturally wouldn't judge a book by its cover. He showed enough respect to Ouyang Xiao. Even Yu Fei, who was beside him, took the initiative to greet Ouyang Xiao and considered himself a junior. The Song dynasty used civil officials to govern the military officials. Yu Fei's action was purely a subconscious action. Yu Fei, who appeared in the wilderness, was over 40 years old and was in the prime of his life. Not only did he look heroic and tall, but he also had an awe-inspiring and righteous look on his face. After a brief greeting, Ouyang Xiao took the opportunity to check the attributes of the two of them. Name: Ouyang Xiao, Emperor level, Dynasty, Song Dynasty, Identity, Civil Official of Great Xia, Occupation, Civil Official Loyalty, 75 points Commander, 45 Martial Power, 30 Intelligence, 85 Politics, 70 Specialty. Ancient Style increases the attractiveness of scholars in the dynasty by 45. Increases the level of humanities in the dynasty by 30. Remarks: Master Ouyang's words are like his person. He looks carefree on the outside, but firm on the inside. Name: Yu Fei, Emperor level, Dynasty, Song Dynasty, Identity, General of Great Xia, Occupation, Special Class General, Loyalty, 75 points Commander, 88 Martial Power, 85 Intelligence, 75 Politics, 60 Specialty. Loyal to the country. Increases the attacking power of the troops by 30. Increases the movement speed of the troops by 25. Increases the morale of the troops by 30. Remarks: Fei is famous for his military exploits. He is pure and unyielding. He is loyal to the public and has extraordinary wisdom and courage. After sending off Ouyang Xiao and Yu Fei, the aftermath of the battle on Cliff Mountain was considered to have come to an end. As for the assignment of the two of them, including the three heroes at the end of the Song dynasty, it would have to wait for Ouyang Xiao to discuss with the cabinet before a final decision could be made. The battle on Cliff Mountain lasted for more than 20 days. By the time Ouyang Xiao returned to Shanghai City, it was already the morning of the 21st day of the 5th year of Gaia. Soon, it was afternoon in the midst of busyness. At 3 in the afternoon, a piece of news suddenly spread throughout the wilderness. Just after the battle on Cliff Mountain ended, Lord Chunshin's Danyang City, Xiongbazi Jimin City, Battle Wolf's Blood Red City, as well as the southern Anhui Province and eastern Lu Province that were occupied by the Yin Huang Alliance, were all annexed to Handan City. Just like that, Handan City, which had just been promoted to the capital city, leapt to become a leviathan that occupied close to 6 provinces. Ouyang Xiao guessed that the moment Handan City was promoted, Lord Chunshin and the rest were already prepared to annex Handan City. It was only because they wanted to bring more troops on the battle map that they delayed the annexation until the end of the battle. At this time, the Yin Huang Alliance's plan was finally revealed. They wanted to rely on Handan City's promotion to form a super empire together with the hope of contending with Great Xia. This was completely possible. Unlike the southern border where Great Xia was entrenched, the 5 provinces that were annexed to Handan City were traditionally rich and populous. They had always been the central hub of the Central Plains dynasty and were worth much more than the provinces in the southern border. To put it bluntly, even in the Ming dynasty, the provinces in the southern border were considered half-barren land. Therefore, although Handan City could not compare to Great Xia in terms of territory, it was comparable to Great Xia in terms of foundation and potential. In some aspects, it even surpassed Great Xia. It was reported that Di Chun had successfully applied for the mission to establish a new empire. Once the mission was completed, a new empire would stand tall in the Central Plains and become a new pole in the wilderness. Following this annexation, a shocking fact was placed in front of everyone. The Yin Huang Alliance, that had existed for 4 years and held an important position in the wilderness, had officially disbanded today and become history. At this moment, the Chinese players were in a daze. Since the beginning of the game, the Mountain and Sea Alliance and the Yin Huang Alliance had been fighting each other in the wilderness. In less than 5 years, this situation had been completely broken. In these 5 years, the wilderness had gone from having thousands of lords living together to only 3 lords: Ouyang Xiao, Di Chun, and Feng Xiaohuang. The changes could be said to be earth-shattering. Just based on the player's territories, Great Xia, Handan City, and Fallen Phoenix City could barely be considered as the three legs of a tripod. Chapter 1044, 22nd of the 5th month, Xia Palace. Ouyang Shua gently put down the matter of Handan City, because it was already within his expectations. In the royal study, Ouyang Shua was discussing the arrangements for Ouyang Xiu, Lu Xiufu, and Wen Tianxiang. As for Yu Fei and Zhang Shiji, according to the rules, they will first train in the military for a month before being assigned to the Imperial Guards. The next time the army is reorganized, they will be assigned to suitable positions. Last year, in the annual evaluation organized by the Bureau of Personnel, there were 5 governors who barely passed the evaluation and were put on the list of replacements by Ouyang Shua. Unfortunately, because there was no suitable successor, it had been delayed. Jiang Shang meant to arrange for 3 people to take over as governors. Ouyang Shua thought for a while and did not fully accept Jiang Shang's suggestion. He only agreed to release Lu Xiufu and Wen Tianxiang. Let's put Ouyang Xiu in the court. He can make use of his influence in the Song dynasty. Ouyang Shua said. Jiang Shang was stunned. He did not think so much and said shamefully, "Your Majesty is very thoughtful. I am ashamed." Ouyang Shua waved his hand. Which position does the minister think is suitable for Ouyang Xiu? This person may be famous, but he is not up to the task. We need to choose a suitable position. This was a secret discussion between the emperor and his official. If it was outside, Ouyang Shua would not be so direct. Jiang Shan's control of the court was already very good, and he knew all kinds of people. He thought for a while and said, "May I be so bold as to give Ouyang Xiu the position of the Director of Education, Culture, and Defense?" Ouyang Shua thought for a moment and nodded his head in satisfaction. Under the leadership of Su Zhe, the dynasty's scientific, educational, and cultural work had already stepped onto the right track. There was no need for bold and decisive reforms. It was just right for Ouyang Xiu, the leader of the literary world. Jiang Shang was indeed good at using people. What should we do with Su Zhe? Ouyang Shua asked. Su Zhe was in charge of education, culture, and defense, and he worked hard. He could not just kick him away like this. If Su Zhe was demoted to a place, with Su Zhe's rank as a 3rd rank, other than the governor, he would be demoted. This was a problem. Jiang Shang, on the other hand, had already calculated it clearly. He replied, "This old official suggests that Su Zhe be transferred to the Pavilion of Secret Texts and become a scholar of the Pavilion of Secret Texts. Even though his rank will drop by half a rank, he will still be considered to be in the central administration. In reality, it is a demotion on the surface, but a hidden promotion." Ouyang Shua's eyes lit up. Jiang Shan's suggestion was in line with his thoughts. As the affairs of the dynasty became increasingly heavy, the burden on Qingyi, the scholar of the Pavilion of Secret Texts, also became heavier and heavier. Although the Pavilion of Secret Texts had added 4 secretaries to assist Qingyi, they were still too busy. Transferring Su Zhe into the Secret Text Pavilion was undoubtedly a clever move. Although Su Zhe's literary talent was not as good as his older brother Su Shi's, he had a keen insight and pragmatic approach to politics. He was very suitable for the Secret Text Pavilion. With Su Zhe's help, Qingyi could relax a lot. After thinking for a while, Ouyang Shua suddenly asked, "How is Feng Qingyue's performance in the Shu province?" It had already been more than half a year since Feng Qingyue assisted the governor of Shu Prefecture, Tian Wenjing, in eliminating the hidden dangers in Shu Prefecture. Ouyang Shua thought that it was about time for Feng Qingyue's test to come to an end. Ouyang Shua didn't want to break the connection with the Feng family just like that. Jiang Shang replied, "According to the governor of Shu Prefecture, Tian Wenjing's monthly court bulletin, he is very satisfied with Feng Qingyue. His words are full of praises." Some time ago, Tian Wenjing also requested the imperial court to officially appoint Feng Qingyue as a subordinate of the governor's yamen. Oh, Ouyang Shua was a little surprised. Tian Wenjing was a cold-faced governor. Since he took the initiative to mention this matter, It was enough to prove that Feng Qingyue's work in the past half a year was recognized by Tian Wenjing. Speaking of which, Feng Qingyue was really patient. In the past half a year, Ouyang Shuo almost didn't care about her, but Feng Qingyue didn't throw a tantrum. Instead, she quietly fulfilled her duties in Shu. She was really a strange woman. Ouyang Shuo joked, "It seems that our cold-faced governor is cold on the outside, but warm on the inside." Jiang Shang smiled stiffly. He couldn't tell whether the king was praising or disparaging Feng Qingyue, so he didn't dare to reply directly. He carefully asked, "Your Majesty, what do you mean?" Ouyang Shuo stopped smiling and said faintly, "Since Feng Qingyue has been recognized by the superior, we can't just let her be. Immediately issue a decree to transfer Feng Qingyue to the secret text pavilion and temporarily take up the position of secretary." Ouyang Shuo still wanted to observe Feng Qingyue for a while and didn't rush to make a conclusion. After all, Feng Qingyue came from one of the 6 great clans. He couldn't be too cautious when dealing with such a sensitive person. Of course, if he used this person correctly, it would be a milestone for Great Xia. Yes, Jiang Shang nodded. He finally understood why the king suddenly asked about Feng Qingyue. Taking the opportunity to add Su Zhe and Feng Qingyue, Ouyang Shuo made a small adjustment to the secret text pavilion. He officially appointed Qingyi as the Palm Seal Scholar of the Secret Text Pavilion and made it clear that she was the head of all the scholars in the Secret Text Pavilion. Of course, Qingyi's rank was still primary rank 4. The nature of the Secret Text Pavilion meant that Ouyang Shuo couldn't give her a high rank. In addition, Ouyang Shuo also issued a decree to further expand the Secret Text Pavilion. He added 6 secretaries at once. Other than the assistant scholar of the Secret Text Pavilion, every inter-pavilion elder was assigned a full-time secretary to hang in the Secret Text Pavilion. Different from the 4 great academies, other than the 3 inter-pavilion elders, there weren't any clerks to handle documents in the inter-pavilion. All the affairs of the inter-pavilion had to be handled by the 3 inter-pavilion elders. Unfortunately, the inter-pavilion elders were already old, so it was inevitable that they wouldn't have enough energy. The reason why Ouyang Shuo assigned secretaries to the inner pavilion was to help the inner pavilion elders deal with documents. At the same time, hanging the secretaries in the secret text pavilion was equivalent to strengthening his control over the inner pavilion. It was killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Jiang Shang naturally couldn't express any opinion on this, and could only thank the king for his kindness. That afternoon, the imperial court issued a series of appointments and removals. Ouyang Shuo was appointed as the director of science and education. Lu Xiufu was appointed as the director of administration of the Annan Province Governor's Office, and Wen Tianxiang was appointed as the prefectural governor of the Fengtian County of the Northern Frontier Province. The fact that Lu Xiufu was assigned to the Annan Province was enough to prove the importance that Ouyang Shuo attached to him. This time, he took the opportunity of changing the prefectural governor to assign Wen Tianxiang to the Northern Frontier Province. Apart from his trust in Wen Tianxiang's ability, Ouyang Shuo also wanted to balance Lao Ai's influence in the Northern Frontier Province. Ever since the incident of the dragon seeking acupoints, Ouyang Shuo had deeply understood the principle that people's hearts would change. The best way to ensure that the subordinates wouldn't change their minds was to not give them a chance to change their minds. Before the temptation even showed any signs, they had to cut it off decisively. Take Lao Ai as an example. As the former lord of Wanshur City, Lao Ai had been working in the Northern Frontier Province for 4 years, and his influence had long seeped into all aspects of the Northern Frontier Province. If Ouyang Shuo didn't check and balance him, even if Lao Ai originally didn't have the intention to change his mind, over time, under the direct or indirect influence of his subordinates, relatives, and friends, he would gradually become too big to get rid of in the Northern Frontier Province. When that time came, it wouldn't be a good thing for Great Xia, or even for Lao Ai himself. This time, assigning Wen Tianxiang to the Northern Frontier Province was not only to check and balance Lao Ai, but also to protect him in disguise. Ouyang Shuo believed that with Lao AI's intelligence, he would be able to figure out the meaning behind this. Apart from the 3 new civil officials, the imperial court also had other appointments and removals. Qing Yi, a scholar of the Secret Text Pavilion, was promoted to the Palm Seal Scholar of the Secret Text Pavilion. Su Zhe was relieved of his post as the Director of Education and Civil Guard, and was transferred to the position of a Scholar of the Secret Text Pavilion. Feng Qinghue was officially transferred to the position of Secretary of the Secret Text Pavilion. At the same time, according to the order of the king, the cabinet would also organize an internal selection to select 6 secretaries with both ability and integrity for the Secret Text Pavilion. As soon as the news came out, the imperial court was shocked. As the central organization closest to the king, although the Secret Text Pavilion's grade wasn't high, it was the ladder to the promotion of young officials. To be selected to be a secretary of the Secret Text Pavilion meant that they had obtained the recognition of both the king and the cabinet. In addition, with the special function of the Secret Text Pavilion, not only could they increase their knowledge and come into contact with the core secrets of the imperial court, they would also have a lot of opportunities to interact with the ministers of the imperial court. As long as they could gain experience in the Secret Text Pavilion for a year or 2, it wouldn't be a problem for them to be sent out as a prefectural governor. As such, how could it not cause a sensation in the imperial court? For a moment, countless young talents displayed their abilities like the 8 immortals crossing the sea. They went around to inquire about information and asked people to plead for a position. As for this matter, Ouyang Shuo gave full authority to the cabinet and no longer asked about it. 3 o'clock in the afternoon. After signing the appointment and removals, Ouyang Shuo summoned Zhang Liang, the Grand Secretary of the Treasury, to the imperial study. Following the changes in the Secret Text Pavilion, the layout of the imperial study would also be adjusted. As an official of the Secret Text Pavilion, Qingyu would no longer work in the imperial study. Instead, she would be assigned to a separate room next to the imperial study. That area would also be the yamen of the Secret Text Pavilion and would have an independent entrance. There was a door between the 2 areas. Ouyang Shuo could enter the imperial study from the main door, and he could also pass through this door to enter the office area of the Secret Text Pavilion and leave from there. This ensured that Qing Yi and the others could be summoned at any time and also guaranteed the safety of the imperial study. At present, in the huge imperial study, besides Ouyang Shuo himself, there was only a female official who followed Ouyang Shuo and took care of his daily needs. Outside the door stood a group of divine martial guards, ready to receive orders at any time. Originally, Guard General Su Chu insisted on personally standing guard, but was rejected by Ouyang Shuo. Su Chu was now a 4th-rank general. How could he stand guard every day? Even so, the straightforward Su Chu still set up a drill ground in the side courtyard of the imperial study and personally oversaw it. If anything happened, Su Chu could bring the divine martial guards to the imperial study within 5 minutes. Because Ouyang Shuo was used to discussing matters with the ministers in the imperial study, and the matters he discussed often involved the highest secrets of the imperial court, the female official who served him as the only outsider present had to be absolutely loyal to Ouyang Shuo. Moreover, her mouth had to be especially tight, and not a single word could be leaked to the outside. At present, there was no suitable candidate yet, so Zissou could only personally serve in the imperial study. Ouyang Shuo withdrew his thoughts, put down the teacup, and said to Zhang Liang, who was sitting in the hall, "There are some adjustments to the Secret Text Pavilion, and the treasury also needs to be moved." No one knew why Ouyang Shuo would adjust the 2 centers. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.